Hello and welcome to the second day of Adobe DITAWorld 2022, the world's largest DITA online conference for marketing and technical communication professionals. We are incredibly proud and incredibly excited to have you all back for what is now the 7th edition of Adobe DITAWorld. Many of the nearly 6,200 content professionals worldwide who registered this year have been with us since 2016 already. We indeed had another great first day of the conference yesterday. Martina Navratilova inspired us all with her amazingly beautiful welcome note. And Adobe customers and partners like BlackBerry and Array Insurance, Scriptorium, Publishing Smarter, Precision Content, Xerox.net and Congo from Germany inspired us with their presentations. And in the highly active chat, things really took off. I hope it will be the same today. And also, today on the second day, we have a lot in the pipeline for you. Amit Ahuja, Senior Vice President of Experience Cloud at Adobe, will welcome you with his welcome note. And right after that, in our triple keynote, Anush Jain from Accenture, Daniel Nutburn from Acrolinx, and Paul Gillihan from Adobe will tell you how you can uncover the value of optimizing your content supply chain. And then, Huntley Eshenroder and Michelle Mamistvalov from Zebra Technologies in the US will tell you about Zebra's technical content digital transformation, which they created with Adobe solutions. And Susanna Carlisi from Ciena will share how Adobe Experience Manager can help content professionals manage post-sales content. And in the midday keynote, the wonderful British gentleman Julian Murphy, CEO of Mecon, will ask the question, is it safe to mention DITA in polite society? And from then on, in the second half of the day, we have some real treats with presentations from Markus Wiedemeyer and Frank Ralph. It's all about API documentation with OpenAPI and Swagger, DITA, AM, metadata. It's all a little bit techy, a little bit geeky, but pretty cool stuff. And finally, Bernard Ashramton will give you a concentrated load of tips on how to get even more power out of AM guides, which is formerly known as XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager. My name is Stefan Gans, and I'm the Senior Worldwide Evangelist for Technical Communication at Adobe. And with me is TechCom superstar Matt Sullivan as my much appreciated co-host and co-moderator. Welcome, Matt. So it's going to be another exciting day. Enjoy it, be active in the chat, exchange ideas, ask questions, and be wild and wonderful. What did Martina Navratilova say in her welcome note yesterday? Continue to follow your passion. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and go for it. And with that, I want to hand over to Amit Ahuja, Senior Vice President of Experience Cloud at Adobe. Over to you, Amit.
I'm Amit Ahuja, SVP of Platform and Product for Adobe Experience Cloud. I'm thrilled to spend time with you today at our 7th Adobe DITAWorld event and hope that you enjoyed the excellent speakers and sessions yesterday. It is incredible to think about the profound global shift in work, learning, and entertainment that we've witnessed over the past 2 years. E-commerce sales continue to set records. Telehealth visits are now the norm rather than the exceptions. Customers are using online customer support, online help, and self-service systems more than ever before. Enterprises have moved from on-premise solutions to cloud-native solutions. Paper-based processes have been consigned to the wastebasket of history as e-signatures become the norm. digitization and integration have become more important than ever. Students are more accustomed to e-learning at home. People are finding shared connection and community in immersive games and virtual concert experiences. Real-time collaboration across organizations and geographies happens on a daily basis. Increasingly, we're using the digital world to do things that we once only did in the physical world. This is happening in industry after industry. Simply put, the distinction between what people do in the physical and virtual world is blurring, as evidenced by all the buzz and excitement around Web3 and the metaverse. If you think about the magnitude and impact of these changes across industries, it is absolutely massive. It's not only changed people's habits and expectations, it's also changed how we work, as hybrid and remote work have become the norm. And companies shifted operations to better meet customer needs. Every business is rethinking how they engage with consumers and business buyers alike. This goes far beyond just selling online and touches on how companies contribute to society, build and sustain trust, and earn customer loyalty. The pandemic raised the bar on agility, integration, and time to value. It also prompted companies to bridge functional silos across sales, marketing, product, IT, finance, and support to understand how to run a digital business end to end. At the heart of the burgeoning digital economy is content. Digital content consumption is exploding across more devices and platforms than ever before. We're living at a time where content, creativity, and design have never been more valued. For the digital business, great customer experiences rely on standout content and high-impact design being delivered in a way that's personalized to their individual context. We see it every day with our products. The quality of the experiences that companies create and deliver have a direct impact on a customer lifetime value and business growth. The topics of digital transformation and changing customer expectations are dominating business conversations. We're all grappling with what it means for our businesses and how we capitalize on the enormous opportunity of the digital economy. For us, the call to action is to make the digital economy personal. It's what we've done at Adobe, from how we engage with our employees to how we serve customers and collaborate with partners. At the heart of every great experience is an emotional connection, and great content is critical to making that happen. Experiences need to be real-time to deliver the right message to the right customer in the right context and through the right vehicles. Customer journeys need to be seamless across numerous touchpoints and across whatever channels your customers use to connect with your brand. For end customers, that result is a satisfying experience. For businesses, it is the imperative to action data in milliseconds to be responsive to customers. Regardless of where companies are in their digital maturity, Adobe Experience Cloud is uniquely positioned to deliver on your needs. Whether you're a mid-sized manufacturer just enabling digital commerce or a global multinational to looking to orchestrate your end-to-end experiences with customers across channels. Adobe Experience Cloud is a comprehensive, unified set of applications to optimize all aspects of the customer journey. At its core, and the focus of our ongoing innovation, is Adobe Experience Platform with billions of customer profiles at the center. It harnesses trillions of transactions to deliver personalized customer journeys at every touchpoint from acquisition to monetization. We think deeply about how to best help customers deliver exceptional, personalized experiences that drive business value. The bedrock to our modern content system is built on 3 strategic pillars that unlock greater business opportunities. 1, content for all, to empower all teams to collaborate in the creation processes. Last year, we launched Assets Essentials, an application that allows sharing of content across every team and automatically surface digital assets in the apps you use every single day. In addition, with quick experience creation tools, you could quickly go from templates in Adobe XD, our UI UX design solution, to one or hundreds of sites in Experience Manager with low to no code required. 2, experience intelligence that leverages data and machine learning to unlock personalized experiences at scale. This cuts down mundane and error-prone tasks and drives greater efficiency. For example, with features like smart color tags and content automation, we have brought intelligent asset processing capabilities to generate variations into the DAM. In addition, with advancements in our automated forms conversion service, you can quickly convert static forms into a modernized, personalized experience and serve customers wherever they are with minimal IT effort. And with Adobe Experience Manager Guides, the just rebranded DITA CCMS, formerly known as XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager, Adobe Experience Cloud becomes a central place for all enterprise content and for what you know is intelligent information in future Industry 4.0 and IoT scenarios. And finally, 3, omnichannel content delivery ensures content can be created once and reused across multiple channels. Over the last year, we expanded our headless CMS offering with support from GraphQL delivery and React core components to manage decoupled content for your apps, SPAs, or any rich front-end experience. As digital becomes more critical to business growth, Adobe's mission to change the world through digital experiences is proving to be more relevant than ever before. On the eve of our 40th anniversary later this year, we're incredibly proud of the impact our technologies have had on every aspect of society, from desktop publishing and imaging to electronic documents, video and gaming, and of course, digital marketing and commerce. It is truly humbling to think that the digital world runs on Adobe's tools and platforms. Thank you again for joining us for Adobe DITAWorld this year. We're grateful to all the customers and partners sharing their insights and best practices. We appreciate the opportunity for rich discussion over the course of the event and beyond. Be sure to check out the Content Impacts Whom triple keynote we're doing with Accenture and Acrolinx immediately following this session. Thank you so much.
And it is a pleasure to be with you here today. When I joined Acrolinx last year, I had a background in data and analytics, but I was not familiar with the content creation and curation space. I found the online back catalogue of DITAWorld presentations an invaluable resource. Not only did I get an understanding of the market dynamics, but I found a large, committed community passionate about their work, and it is a pleasure to be presenting to you today. It was apparent to me that within this community, the need for a well-defined and well-governed content architecture to ensure better collaboration, distributed writing, ease of reuse and repurposing of content with all the associated efficiency and productivity gains is well understood. Indeed, the need to get the right consultancy advice, choose the right supporting technology, such as AEM Guides and Acrolinx, is also widely acknowledged. From my subsequent research, though, I did find a gap. Not all company leaders understand the importance and significant value of the work that you do, which prevents you getting the associated visibility and investment. The challenge is linking the efficiency and productivity gains to key business metrics, those that are important to company boards, and creating a way of analyzing and showing this business impact over time. So today, I am joined by my friends Anuj from Accenture and Paul from Adobe, and together we will look to provide you with a content market point of view, an approach for assessing content impact, and a real-world look at the benefits that good content can have for an organization. We hope this will be a valuable investment of your time. With that, I would like to pass over to Anuj.
Hello, everyone. Digital technologies rush in the last 1 decade, and more importantly in the pandemic in last 2-3 years, has opened up infinite possibilities for people to experience product and services in radically creative ways. more so for the customer services organizations and the marketeers. This has been a very uphill task, especially with the right here, right now approach. It creates a new challenge for them, and with so many channels to come forward, and for every customer the content to be personalized, it continue to add more complexity at their way. My name is Anuj. I work for Accenture Song, or formerly Interactive. We are the largest network of digital agencies in the world. In the B2B and B2C industry, the new buyer industry has been incredibly complex and unpredictable. One cannot simply imagine that if you have so many customers at the top of the funnel, some of the prospects will emerge from the bottom. Especially in the customer environment, customer service environment, and the marketing environment, the digital first approach requires a change in the mindset and a new approach to the content. And as always, Accenture believes the content for the same needs to be accessible, especially delivering into the multiple uh, omni-channel environment or the content platforms, whether it's for searching or for the e-commerce need, via digital asset management, product information systems, especially accessibility for the especially able people, which is actually constitute almost about 1 billion population across world. The content needs to be catering to that kind of population as well, because they are also consumers in the highly complex world. Next is the content need to be modular, where the certain blocks of the content can be repurposed. The usability needs to be at the constant in the mind when the content is being produced. It needs to be enhanced by the with the play of the data, whether it's your services data or is your enterprise data. It's need to really cater to enhance the experience, and at the same time also provide insights for the next possible action. um, and more so now, during the pandemic phase, organization has also come to realize that the content needs to be increasingly human. It needs to be always listening, it needs to be purpose driven, and especially personalized and create an authenticity in any brand which is actually trying to position through this content. And lastly, taking the cultural, geopolitical, localized need of the messaging. It is very important that these experiences allow for the local experiences. They remain market relevant, and also extremely automated for the efficiency and scale to be created here. That brings us to the next phase, where the great content plays a critical roles in moving the consumer from discovery, interest creation, buying services, and actually becoming a loyal customer to the organization. But it is extremely important that you map these content to the new fluid phases of these buying experiences, and which is where the very important that the personas of the customers are also kept in mind whom you want to reach. That brings us to the new content life cycle for the marketer or a customer services organization. So if you really see it, the next generation content planning needs to be for the systems like campaign systems, CRM systems, your content strategy for the DXM platforms, catering to the new content types, whether it is imagery, video, products, or even for that matter, the 3D imagery, the metaverse content. All of that needs to be actually kept in the mind. Third, it needs to have the best in the class technology or the digital channels, whether you're catering to the social channels or DXP platforms. Your DAMs, PIMs, or AEM guides consistently need to be connected with the all your the direct to consumer or B2B consumer platforms. And lastly, it's not only about the efficiency and the scale of the content, but also the measurement of the content is need to be impact it needs to be really also looked at it for its impact. So with the advent of analytics engines, the reports or the A/B testing, which actually allows you to for the marketeers or the content creation team to really look at the effectiveness of their content upfront. This actually now brings us to another point of view where we are saying that with a lot of digital channels coming in, a lot of digital devices up front, and the emergence of the e-commerce, the and then the work-life balance that had made the organization to really think of that what kind of capabilities they need to evolve with, especially now. Every now and then the channels are proliferating with the left to right shift. The content has become from low volume to very very high volume. Your workflows are now static to very very dynamic workflows. Your publishing approach needs to be dynamic. Your customer engagement has to be two-way, because the content is not only produced by the single environment, but also the consumer generated content as well. And then also look at it, the publishing speed, where it used to be a weekly publishing or weekly release cycles to probably multiple times during the day. In this whole mix, if you really see it, where the consumer is going with this, you will find many consumer, they get into the behavior of really engagement and intent to buy right here right now, if they are offered with the right if they are offered the right information at the right time. And but despite all of that, you will also find majority of them probably might take a u-turn. They lean forward with the information in their hand, but they take a u-turn because there are third party reviews, their comparative analysis or competitive offers are also out there. So our capabilities should be also catering to these new dynamics of receiving the information in consumer hand. And that brings us that for the organization, that what kind of opportunities they have to cater to. And from the Accenture point of view, especially in the design, build, run, and communicate type of capabilities, they put a 4 bets onto the system. Number one, your content needs to be highly intelligent, stay relevant, become more and more compliant, and finally, it needs to be always fresh, and up to date. The second big bet, which Accenture talks about, is your next generation brand experience, where it actually enable every marketer to catch the consumer right on every DXM platform, CXM platforms, your channels. The content gets personalized for every consumer. It also assimilate or embrace the user generated content, considering the environment or the geopolitical situation. It also caters for the new digital products. Third, you need to have a very very efficient understanding about your consumer, what kind of consumer segment, what kind of personas you are catering to, and accordingly your content needs to be delivered for to achieve the campaign performance. Your A/B testing is actually catering to that, and you are continuing to evolve your customer journeys. Lastly, the big push on the efficiencies, the automation plays a very important role, because of to achieve the speed of publishing. You need to have your content better, faster, cheaper, high quality, and at the same time accessible by diverse set of people and consumers. With that, I want to pass on to my colleague and the next speaker in the line. Thank you so much.
We've now heard from Anuj on how brands are adapting their content lifecycles to meet consumer demands. Let's look at the impact this has on the content creation process. The content creation struggle, as I'm calling it here, is the challenge to deliver personalized customer experience consistently across the content lifecycle, when creation and management silos reduce visibility and manageability, as per my colorful squiggle. I'm going to lean heavily here upon a Forrester report that Adobe commissioned in August 2021, which was entitled Supercharged Long-Form Content for Personalized and Consistent Experiences, which if you've not read, I would encourage you to have a look at. As described at the beginning, we have established a need to tie content impact to business drivers. Well, 50% of those surveyed in that Forrester's report believed that unclear documentation poses a risk to customer support. That 80% of those surveyed found that an effective content solution has the effect of reducing compliance and regulatory issues. And they were universally supportive of the statement. that organizations should ensure that customers are able to get relevant, personalized content across different touchpoints, that organizations are able to author, manage, and deliver personalized content and experiences at scale. So how to get there? What we need is a way of bringing these stakeholders into alignment through a common understanding of what good and great look like. By reducing friction in the system, we can increase the velocity of content creation. As Goose said in Top Gun, I feel the need for speed. The benefits of increased throughput come from its ability to allow organizations to respond in a more fleet-footed way to customer demands and market stimuli. The approach we take has 3 steps. First, we work with our customers to get organizational agreement on their operational style guides and brand guidelines. Getting this off the shelf and operational is a key success criteria for digital leaders. Second, we build the guidelines into a governance platform that can be configured and tuned to address departmental, persona, or team-level derivations. As part of this process, we provide you and your stakeholders with a company-specific benchmark of content quality, the Acrolinx score. This allows for a conversation to happen that is linked intrinsically to the corporate content goals, with reference points linked to key quality features, such as tone of voice, inclusivity, or accuracy. Thirdly, we provide a governance mechanism for ensuring that the content that is being put into the hands of customers is impactful and meets the content goals you have determined as important for your business. This is an approach that we have developed over time. We at Acrolinx have a long history of working with content creators at scale, having started out as a spin-off from DFKI, the German Research Center for AI. We find that this approach helps our customers solve a number of key business challenges. How to optimize content operations by bringing brand guidelines and style guides to life and providing content creators with guidance at their fingertips, which makes them hugely productive. How to minimize corporate risk associated with content. Microsoft calls us their content creation insurance policy, and we have many clients who are using us to support their diversity and inclusivity programs by providing writing guidelines around inclusive language. How to align many writers with one voice. One of our UK banking clients has moved to agile development principles across their IT estate. This means that they now have many more people contributing micro pieces of content, none of whom have professional writing experience, and many of whom, while subject matter experts in their own fields, are not aware of the corporate brand guidelines and policies. This can lead to a cornucopia of writing styles and linguistic anomalies, unless you have a method for standardization. In addition to standardization, an organization needs a consistent way to review both its pre- and post-production content to be able to truly determine its impact. At the earliest stage, the focus of the content creation process is on accuracy and efficiency. How do we build content with the right terminology, with as much automation, so it can be localized, reused, and repurposed, and cost-effective? Here, the objective for a content impact platform is to provide as much guidance as possible to the content creator. In Acrolinx, this is our sidebar technology. At the next stage, the aim is to ensure that as the content creation engine gets into gear, that you have a mechanism for checking that all of your content is being added to your content management system and meets your aligned and agreed benchmark of quality. You can do this through automated content checking and the creation of a content quality gate. In our platform, this is our automation engine and our analytics. And finally, you need a way to help marketing teams understand how the message is resonating, whether it is reaching the right audience and generating the types of responses that they are looking for. We bring content scoring and post-production analytics, like Adobe Analytics, together in our Content Cube extension to provide a visual way of making correlations between content quality and the content impact. So this is how we believe you can deliver the most impactful content for your stakeholders and consumers. Now, let's get a practitioner's perspective. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Dan. Technical content is the lifeblood of any practitioner. That material could consist of tutorials, documentation, release notes, training courses, knowledge base articles, really any material that helps answer the question at hand. And that's the same whether you're working on your own or whether you're part of a huge multinational team. Finding the answers to the questions you have is really a make or break in your day. It certainly impacts your productivity and that of the team you work for. But with that being said, once you've found that material, it has to be accurate, relevant, up to date, and make sense. If one or any of those attributes are missing, that's going to impact the trust that people have in the material. If it happens consistently, it can do a lot more damage. It can impact the trust they have in the company. It can impact the usage they have on a product if they can't get it to work or they can't troubleshoot the problem effectively. It could also impact the renewal or subscription of a service. So self-help material has to be right from the start. You'd think that maybe a small typo or an oddly structured sentence or a broken link is a minor inconvenience. Customer would let it go. It's easy to fix. However, as people interact with this material, usually while troubleshooting their problems, they have a more heightened sense of urgency. So if that material has issues or even errors, it absolutely diminishes their trust in that material. Ideally, mistakes should never get to production in the first place. And that's the philosophy we follow on Adobe's Experience League team. Experience League, which is at experienceleague.adobe.com, is the help, enablement, documentation, community resource for all customers using our Experience Cloud solutions. I'm sure that many of you have used this, or I'm certain that many of your team have used this. If not, please go and check us out. About 4 years ago, the Experience Cloud business started a journey to create a content and authoring validation pipeline that had the principles of quality, speed, and scale at its core. And we called this the Scalable Collaborative Content Model, or SCCM for short. SCCM was envisioned with a content as code mentality and draws on a lot of CI/CD principles to ensure that we are having a constantly flowing freeway of content being authored, validated and checked, structured, packaged, translated, and published in a continuous way. And this library now consists of close to 250,000 pages of content in 12 languages. It covers nearly 90 distinct solution guide areas, and it's maintained and curated by a staff of dedicated authors and collaborators inside the company, such as product management, product marketing, consulting, customer care, even with customers and partners externally. So around 70 dedicated writers maintain this 250,000 pages, but there's over 230 people working in this system to help maintain the material. That's a lot of potential for drift in style, grammatical and editorial differences. Another thing is, as we translate all of this material, we follow a machine translation first principle. 100% of our material goes through machine translation and hits the site. So ensuring that material entering the pipeline is as accurate as possible ensures the machine translation engines make the best possible translation. And that saves us a huge amount of work stemming from reworking oddly translated sentences, bizarre syntax, very long paragraphs that follow on, and the MT starts to struggle with how that's structured. And that equates to improvements in delivery time, reductions in localization cost, and gives us incredibly well-written, well-structured material. And that's key not only for the English authoring teams, the English-speaking authoring teams, but we have many of our teams as a multinational global enterprise where they're writing in English as a second language. So there are many grammatical, syntactual, and other areas that can be introduced just from the rules of their native language. And as they convert those into English, that can introduce some interesting language structure. Acrolinx is a key part of the validation step and really helps set our baseline, control the consistency, and absolutely contributes to that get it right at the start mentality. Importantly, this validation step that occurs in our material, for all of this material that flows through the pipeline, is pretty unobtrusive. If it was an incredibly labor-intensive or long process, it would be difficult for authors to be highly productive. But the reality is, once a piece of material has been created and submitted into validation, getting from validation to publishing is incredibly quick. And this is, at best, just under a minute to maybe 10, 15 minutes, depending on how large that material set is. If it's thousands of pages, might be 10 or 15 minutes. If it's a one-page update, could be 30 seconds to get to production. And that includes checking, validation, the structuring, the packaging, the delivery to production. The SCCM Experience Lead model we've talked about is in place and it's been running for close to 2 years. So we know it works and we've proved it works. But that doesn't mean we're done. We're constantly tuning and refining our term dictionaries in Acrolinx. Our brand language is evolving. The corporate language we use is evolving. The marketplace language we use is evolving. So we're constantly tuning that material. We're also evolving how we use features and adding new capabilities to the environment. One that we're enhancing particularly right now is how we approach the structure of the language we actually use in our documentation. And improving the diversity, equality, and inclusiveness language are huge initiatives for Adobe as a whole, not just the technical authoring team, but in everything we do. And that includes the language in our technical material and the language in our code base of how we deliver this material. And we've spent a lot of time scrubbing that content and the code base to remove any DE&I bias that may have existed in technical language in the past. And we're very excited to be implementing Acrolinx's targets capability to help us systematically manage how we continue to align our equitable and inclusive language. The SCCM content authoring approach really relies on automation and economies of scale to drive what we do. Acrolinx's capabilities allow us to deliver incredibly high quality content. They save us time and money through translation improvements, through the ability to not have to rework material. And it ensures that we get the material to the site as accurately as we can make it the first time. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Dan, to bring us home.
I hope you've enjoyed our presentation. If you would like to know more, please contact us on the email addresses on screen. And remember, as Lee Odden once said, content isn't king, it's the kingdom. Many thanks.
Hello, and welcome to Day 2 of DITAWorld. I hope everyone made it through Day 1. I did, with coffee. I enjoyed the presentation from Marco at BlackBerry. His implementation of AEM Guides is a little bit farther along than ours is, so I'm always interested to see what he and his team are up to. Marco has also patiently answered my questions when I didn't quite understand something. He is a credit to the community of AEM Guides users. So welcome to Digital and Beyond, digital transformation of Zebra's content through DITA. My name is Huntley Eshenroder, and I'm a senior technical writer in the technical content management team. I also serve as the project lead for our implementation of AEM Guides at Zebra.
Hi, my name's Michelle Mamistvalov, and I'm also a senior technical writer with Zebra Technologies. I've been with Zebra for about 7 years now. In addition to writing documentation, I'm also our team's internal content conversion specialist. I also handle all of the DITA development. In my spare time, I dabble in computer programming. Most recently, I've been learning C++ with some help from my brother, who's a game developer. And now, for a brief introduction about Zebra Technologies.
One moment, one action, one decision is all it takes to unleash powerful waves of transformation, impacting teams, businesses, communities, and lives. What if you could enable this effect and meet the demands of immediacy and operational excellence across your organization? The benefits would be exponential, resulting in a dynamic force that touches and transforms everything. Activating this force requires gaining greater visibility into all aspects of your operations and elevating every team and frontline worker to their absolute highest potential. Enhancing experiences, exceeding expectations, fueling pride and fulfillment, igniting remarkable growth. Freeing them from silos and inefficiencies so that they can focus on what's most important and move towards higher, more meaningful contributions. Connecting them to each other and to the right data to guide smarter decisions as the moment unfolds. Allowing them to work intuitively with and alongside machines more intelligently and effortlessly than ever before. Because when you and your teams are fully enabled and empowered to do your best work, this force not only boosts individual success and drives better experiences for those you serve, it also travels all the way back to strengthen the core of your organization, creating an unstoppable momentum, a competitive advantage that keeps going and doesn't let up, allowing you to capture your performance edge only with Zebra.
The technical content management team at Zebra includes 25 people in 5 countries. Our team includes technical writers, videographers, and illustrators who support a range of products, including data capture solutions, mobile computing, data platforms, software, specialty printing, think shipping labels from a major online retailer, location solutions, services, and supplies. A little bit of the background of why we chose DITA and AEM Guides. We decided to move to DITA to improve the customer experience with our technical content. Prior to our transition to DITA, we created our documentation in unstructured FrameMaker and published a PDF. Not very exciting or necessarily user-friendly. By moving to DITA, we can write our documentation in a structured format and produce HTML and PDF. We also realized that we could increase our content reuse and reduce maintenance with the move to DITA. Several writers within Zebra used conditions and text insets to reuse content, but it was becoming increasingly complex and error-prone. You'll see an example soon. We chose AEM Guides after a successful POC with Adobe. AEM Guides was a logical choice because Zebra.com, Zebra's website, uses AEM. That means we have an in-house team of AEM expertise for supporting AEM Guides.
Speaking of improving the customer experience, here you can see how the same content looks on a mobile device in HTML on the left here versus a PDF on the right. The HTML is much easier to read and presents a cleaner customer experience. I think it's important our content looks good on mobile, since one of our biggest businesses is mobile computers. The web browser version also looks pretty good. As you can see from one of our published guides, our customers can still get the PDF if they're interested, but the web-based content is really what's in fashion now.
After we decided to use AEM Guides as our DITA CMS, we developed a strategy for our implementation. One part of this strategy was to have a small team of writers prepare for the transition to DITA. Two primary activities of this team were content conversion and writer training. Conversion was extremely important because all of our content was unstructured and stored on a file system. We decided on the following strategy. New product documentation would start in DITA. This made sense because it would spare us from converting it in the future, and new products were likely to have a longer lifespan. Second, documentation for products that are under active development and continually updating. These documents should be in DITA as well. And finally, end-of-life or near end-of-life product documentation would not be converted and remain in its unstructured format. Writer training, the second activity for this team, was important because a majority of our writers did not have DITA experience or write in a structured manner. Another key point that this team performed was building relationships with key stakeholders. The marketing team owns AEM, and we needed their approval and support to use AEM as our content repository and our DITA authoring tool. The Web IT team supports AEM and develops new features, both for the marketing team and for us. They are our primary internal support for resolving issues and customizing AEM guides. The DevOps team supports our AEM infrastructure. We're an on-prem user of AEM. When we add writers to the AEM user base, we need to increase the performance of AEM to make a seamless experience. And finally, the support team that manages the support pages on Zebra.com, where our documentation is hosted. Our move from PDF to HTML required modification of the support pages, and we had to make sure that the support team was on board with these changes.
Once we were ready to start authoring, we began by converting some existing content. Since we were doing the conversions mainly in-house, we automated the conversion process as much as possible by using the FrameMaker plugin FM to DITA by Leximation. Shout out to Scott. So far, we have converted over 2,500 pages from unstructured FrameMaker. I need to note here that a huge amount of cleanup is required when converting unstructured content. For that reason, for smaller documents, it's much faster to actually just copy and paste content into AEM. A large conversion project that we didn't have the time for in-house is in process right now by Publishing Smarter. Thanks, Bernard. When we were deciding what content to convert and when to just start with new content, as Huntley mentioned previously, we decided that only current and new product content would be converted. We are leaving anything end-of-life or near end-of-life in the old, unstructured format. An example of one large set of content that we converted was the mobile computer documentation. The original FrameMaker files served 16 products, with several writers maintaining it. The FrameMaker conditions got, frankly, out of hand, and we had to restrict it to only 2 writers to prevent formatting errors. Plus, after moving to DITA, the content began serving 22 or more products. By now, it is definitely more than 22. So once we got the content in AEM, we decided to use conrefs instead of conditions. And we had a few reasons for this. We could create warehouse topics. With warehouse topics in place, writers now create product-specific topics and pull in only the content they need. The source content is maintained by a few writers, and product guides could be developed by any number of writers. Another reason we went with conrefs was the AEM guides review workflow. Currently, there is no way to filter review content by conditions. Our subject matter experts only want to review content for a specific product. So, with conrefs and product-specific topics, they only get the content for the one product that they are interested in.
The second major effort by our implementation team was training. And for training, we decided on three approaches. First, we asked the writers to take the DITA Basics online course provided by Scriptorium. Thanks, Sarah. On Scriptorium, DITA Basics provides a well-organized introduction to DITA, and it was free. Second, we provided in-house, hands-on training with sample content, so writers could become familiar with DITA and the AEM Guides web interface. And finally, we have an ongoing DITA user group that meets every 2 weeks to reinforce standards, provide best practices, and introduce more advanced topics. Previous topics we've talked about have included the translation, baselines, working with tables, publishing to HTML, and versioning, all important concepts for DITA and AEM guides.
Hey Huntley, what's next?
Good. I'm glad you asked me, Michelle. Now that we are more comfortable with AEM guides and we have more and more content being converted into DITA, we're looking ahead to see how we can continue to evolve our digital strategy. We want to increase the adoption of AEM guides outside of technical content management. And towards that, we just recently completed training writers from another group that came into Zebra through an acquisition. I'm sure they're ready for it. We also want to support more output formats that can support these teams that might need a more flexible output format. One such example is HTML5. And we are also finding ways to repurpose and reuse our DITA content. Michelle is going to show you several projects she is working in that demonstrate the flexibility of our DITA and XML content.
One interesting project that we have been working on is repurposing content. Now that our content is XML, other teams within Zebra can potentially leverage it. One software team that is currently working with us right now is the team that created the 123scan app. This Windows app configures Zebra scanners and currently doesn't have any embedded help. The app asks users to look to the product reference guide for details about options. However, with some minor modifications to the DITA content, such as adding some conditions and variables, the 123scan app turns the XML data into HTML that displays as pop-up help. Here you can see an example where the topic title and the short description are used in this pop-up. This happens to be a very short topic, but if it had more content, it would all show here.
Another example is incorporating videos into our content. Our videographer team produces great videos to help customers. These how-to videos appear on the Zebra.com product support pages. We would like to integrate these videos into our technical documentation. Integrating these videos with our technical documentation gives customers a choice in how they interact and consume information. Step-by-step instructions in the PDF, videos in the HTML, or both. Here is an example where a set of topics are used for our PDF and HTML output. Customers can choose HTML while they are treated to a video. Below the video is a link to the corresponding section of the PDF manual that provides step-by-step instructions. This is the unstructured guide that is currently getting converted to DITA. Here is an example of a PDF from that DITA that links to the videos shown in the HTML. When the DITA is published to HTML, the videos and step-by-step instruction will be accessible from the same topic, providing a superior customer experience.
Another interesting project that we're currently working on involves reuse to the max. This project is currently in development that is moving our regulatory documentation to DITA. And I've never been so excited about regulatory content before. It's interesting because Zebra uses the same legally required regulatory content for every single hardware product in Zebra. And that's a lot of Zebra hardware products. All of the regulatory guides use a portion of a small set of content. Most differences within the content were handled in unstructured FrameMaker using variables. Basically, this means that the content is highly reusable. For moving the content to DITA, we decided to create it using a ton of conditions and variables. By variables here, I mean keyrefs. We plan for authors to reuse entire topics and adjust the conditions and key defs as needed. To go along with this strategy, I created this little Windows app. We plan for this app to be distributed to subject matter experts. When DITA source content is loaded into the app, it provides a content preview. Users can edit bookmap metadata and select which conditions to show or hide. Also, variables are highlighted in the preview window, and users can edit them in text boxes provided on the left side of the form. When the user saves their work, the bookmap metadata, map keyrefs, and DITA-val conditions are all saved out to a set of files. The subject matter experts provide the files to authors, and although the authors may need to make some minimal changes, for the most part, what we get back is the final guide. This app is currently only a proof of concept, but I'll give you a quick preview of what it does so far. Here is some source content. For now, the app only supports a bookmap with one map. Here you could see the bookmap, source content, a DITA-val, a map with a bunch of keyrefs, and for now, just one topic as a sample. And this is the topic. Lots of props in here. So in DITA form, I will load my source map, the book map, and then I will also select my DITA-val file. And then I will save, copy my book map and my DITA-val. I can now edit the bookmap metadata. For example, let's put Acme product 12345. It's May 2022, and this is my first revision. I could select which conditions I want. I'll just grab these first two, although there are a lot more. And then I'll enter some variable info. For here, I'll put 60 degrees, and my model number is 543. I will save. And then after I save, I could show you the edits. So here are the metadata that I entered. And the conditions I selected are include. And in the bookmap, in the map, the model number I entered and the operating temperature that I entered. So these are the files that I would get back from the subject matter expert. The only thing that I might need to do is to fix the path. For example, something like this, to where it actually lives in AEM. Well, however, I plan to automate this in the future, but for now it's a manual find and replace. So once you make the small little change, you're pretty much done and ready to upload to AEM. One feature that I'm working on is an option to download the source files from a URL, maybe a SharePoint folder. This would ensure that subject matter experts always have access to the latest DITA content. And that's very important for making sure that subject matter experts only have one source of truth for the content. And I know at least one person is probably thinking, can't you download the source files directly from AEM? I'm honestly not sure if that's possible or not because of permission issues, but it would be pretty cool. Maybe it'll be available in DITAForm version 2.
Thanks, Michelle. Those are two very interesting projects, and I'm excited to see how they continue to evolve in the future. I think the regulatory guide app is especially interesting and will save writers a lot of time. So this has basically been our journey through DITA, what we've done, and where we're looking to go. If we had to do it over again, there are some things we would do differently, I think, and things we would repeat. I think one thing that we would change is to have a content strategy that would restructure our documentation into smaller, more discrete chunks as we converted it. While our conversion was very effective from taking unstructured content and converting it to DITA, it did not fundamentally change the structure of the information for the customer. HTML is certainly more user-friendly for mobile devices, but a multi-chapter HTML document is not likely the most friendly chunk of content. I think also to keep the faith. Our journey has certainly had its share of bumps. We're the first group of AEM users who rely on versioning and translation of assets. Much of this is new to our support staff, so we've taken the time to train them now on what we do in AEM guides. One thing that we have done well is keep our stakeholders involved. We meet on a weekly basis with our key stakeholders, and the information sharing has been invaluable. We have advanced warning of support site changes and upcoming code deployments. In addition, our core implementation team meets weekly to discuss ongoing developments and to adjust priorities.
We want to thank you for watching, and we hope that you enjoyed our presentation. After the Q&A session, if you have any more questions or comments, please feel free to contact us through email or on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this session. Today I will be describing how we are taking our DITA implementation at Ciena to the next level using AEM guides. Okay, so here is the agenda for today's session. First, I will list our team's drivers for implementing a CCMS, and then I will discuss each requirement in more detail. Before we get started, let me introduce you to Ciena.
Who are we without our experiences? Experiences move us, educate us, connect us to one another. Can technology be the catalyst of experience? Ciena believes that it can, that how we experience technology has everything to do with how we experience life. So we apply technology in the context of your world, working to activate your agenda as though it were our own. It stems from our human commitment, our belief in the power of choice. Because with Ciena people and technology behind your network, we all are at the heart of the world's most rewarding experiences that result in exceptional outcomes. It's who we are, it's where we've been, and it's where we're going. It's the passion we bring to every experience. Ciena. Experience. Outcomes.
Ciena is a networking systems, services, and software company. With over 7,200 specialists around the globe, we support more than 1,700 of the world's largest and most reliable networks. My name is Susanna Carlisi. I am the lead content strategist and tool specialist for Ciena Global Product Documentation. I have over 25 years of experience in the technical communications field, and my current role includes leading the implementation of Adobe Experience Manager Guides. Next, we will look at some of the drivers for Adobe Experience Manager Guides, or AEM guides. So our team was authoring in DITA for several years, around 3 years, before we adopted AEM guides. During this time, it became apparent that we needed to take our implementation to the next level for several reasons. I will discuss each driver in more detail in the following slides, but will quickly summarize the drivers or requirements here. Primarily, we needed a way to optimize reuse and manage dependencies, track the large volume of modular content, and we needed a way to search our content. We also needed a way to streamline versions and releases and integrate release management into the translation workflow. We also wanted to keep our current data authoring and publishing tool, FrameMaker, but we wanted to centralize the publishing. We use FrameMaker settings files that define the publishing parameters and templates, which we also wanted to retain. Lastly, we wanted to leverage reports to track reuse, file errors, and version comments. Just a quick note about AEM Guides. AEM Guides is a full-featured end-to-end solution for your structured data content. With AEM Guides, you can author, manage, and publish your content from a single platform. It offers features such as web-based review, workflow, and translation management integration, just to name a few. I will be touching on just a few of the available features to highlight the high priority drivers for the Ciena implementation. However, AEM Guides offers an abundance of features that allow you to define and customize your solution to suit your organization's requirements. The highest priority drivers were optimizing reuse and dependencies, file management, and search. When we transitioned to DITA, the team was able to benefit from DITA's reuse mechanisms to quickly build deliverables for product variations and different content products, such as getting started and user guides. We primarily implement DITA map and topic level reuse, but we do also implement content references or conrefs to a lesser extent. We author in FrameMaker, and because we were storing our content on a system that was not DITA aware, dependencies were not automatically tracked and downloaded locally to the FrameMaker workspace. What this means is that authors needed to manually track and retrieve all the folders and files referenced in a DITA map in order to resolve all references, since the files for a specific publication are not stored in a single folder. This is especially true for teams who implemented DITA map reuse. What I'm showing here is a very simplistic example, but when there are dozens of maps and hundreds of features, it's not immediately apparent which features are included in each DITA map used to generate output. So how did AEM Guides resolve this issue? Since there is native integration with FrameMaker, you can select a DITA map in AEM Guides and then click on Open in FrameMaker. When the DITA map opens in FrameMaker, all references of the map, including other referenced maps, topics, and graphics, are downloaded to the local FrameMaker workspace automatically. Therefore, you don't need to manually track which files and folders are referenced in the DITA map. AEM Guides automatically keeps track of all dependencies. Moreover, the File Properties view in AEM lists all the maps or topics that file is referenced from. Here's an example of a topic used in multiple DITA maps and DITA files. And here is an example of a conref used in multiple topics. AEM Guides also allows you to move and rename files while retaining all references, versions, and baseline information. One use case where this has been particularly helpful for us is when we want to reuse content that was not initially planned for reuse. We can easily move a topic to the central location where we store reusable content while retaining all links that already exist to other files. Optimized file management. As I mentioned, AEM Guides includes native integration with Adobe FrameMaker. FrameMaker includes a built-in connector to AEM so that you can work with files stored in the repository using the repository manager view shown here. As well, as of FrameMaker 2019, preferences are available to allow seamless integration between AEM and FrameMaker. You can configure auto checkout options in FrameMaker to automatically check out files opened from the AEM web UI. We have the auto checkout option configured to check out a file that is opened from AEM using the Open in FrameMaker option. The file is then opened in FrameMaker for editing and can be checked back into AEM using the FrameMaker repository manager. Just a quick note, you do not have to use FrameMaker in your implementation. AEM Guides includes a full-featured DITA editor. So AEM Guides provides you with the flexibility to use your existing DITA editor or the XML editor in AEM Guides. Searching the repository is important, especially now that we are working with a large volume of topics. Search helps us to locate content for update or for reuse. AEM's robust search allows you to perform full text search across the repository and includes many filters, which are not all shown here. You can also use certain booleans in your search. One feature that has been really helpful is creating a dynamic search called a smart collection for checked out content. You configure the search parameters once and save the search to a smart collection that you can bookmark and access anytime. The search results of a smart collection update dynamically when you perform the search. Next, we will talk about managing versions and releases. We use baselines to create snapshots of DITA maps that will be published and translated. You access the Baselines tab from the DITA map console. The baseline includes information about included files, such as the version of each file, whether it's the latest, and also any labels you configured for the files included in the baseline. Using a label allows you to quickly identify the version of a file that is used or that will be used in a baseline. So this allows you to quickly identify which version of a file is used in a release amongst all the versions of the file. You can configure labels in bulk when you create the baseline, or you can configure labels on a file-by-file basis. We typically configure labels in bulk after taking a baseline for a release, but configure them on a file-by-file basis for up issues, as I will describe on the next slide. Note that a baseline can be created based on the snapshot at a particular time and date, or based on the file labels. So using baselines, versions, labels, branch, and merge, we are able to create up issues of release content without interfering with development for the next release. So for example, during development of the next release, we can revert a file to a previously released version, create a branch of that topic to make updates for an up issue, and then label that topic to identify that it's part of an up issue. At this point, we revert the file back to the latest development version. We repeat this process for all the topics that need to be modified for the up issue. Then we can create a new baseline based on the previously released baseline, but use labels to pick up files that were identified for the up issue. The baselines can be used for publishing. So you can publish any baseline content by selecting it in the Output Presets tab of the DITA map console. You don't have to use a baseline for publishing, but doing so allows you to publish any release of the selected DITA map easily. If a baseline is not indicated, the current version of the files is published. Now we are going to briefly discuss translation and specifically using baselines in the translation workflow. One of the standout features of AEM Guides is the powerful translation workflow. You can use a translation project to create and manage your translations. The files can be sent to a supported translation provider, that is, one that provides an AEM integration, or to machine translation software. We have configured the plugin for our translation vendor into AEM Guides. We consider translation projects to be ongoing projects. That means that the initial source is fully translated and updates are made to the existing translation project as the content evolves. That is, when content in the source language is added or changed with respect to the initial version. In other words, we do not send projects for full translation upon every release. Here, we plan to leverage the power of baselines again. You select the latest baseline in the Translation tab of the DITA map console, and then filter for out of sync or missing content. The system will then automatically display the topics that are out of date or that have been added since the last translation. Therefore, you only need to send those topics to the translation vendor. This saves time and money spent on translations. support the current authoring and publishing workflows. As I mentioned in the slide on file management, AM Guides includes native integration with Adobe FrameMaker. This is important to us since our team authors in FrameMaker, which is a tool that they are very familiar with. AM Guides can also be configured to publish with FrameMaker Publishing Server, including the ability to publish any baseline data map. Here, we can take advantage of our already configured FrameMaker settings files that can be used to publish using our various branded templates. You can point to a settings file that you store on the AM server directly using the settings file field, or you can point to a FrameMaker Publishing Server preset. Of course, you can also publish using the DITA Open Toolkit. AM Guides includes various reports that you can use to monitor your content. On the next slides, I will give an overview of the reports we use at Ciena. The Content Reuse Report allows you to track your reuse and provide statistics for each topic. Average content reuse is shown as the total number of content reuse instances divided by the total topic count and is displayed as a percentage. The DITA map report provides a snapshot of the overall health of the files in the DITA map. It lists information such as the number of missing topics, topics with missing elements, and review status of each topic. Clicking on a file in the list also provides detailed information for that file, including information on any broken references. You can also open a selected file in the web editor or FrameMaker from this view. Version Comments is a custom tool that was created for Ciena and was made available to us as an installable package. We use this tool to create a report of versions, check-in comments, and labels. We use this report to list check-in comments for all files in a folder and its subfolders, avoiding the need to check the version history rail for each file individually. Also, we apply labels to the files in a baseline at release time. Therefore, we can generate and export this report to a spreadsheet and then filter on the label to obtain a list of all the files included in a baseline or release. Ciena implementation summary. So to summarize the Ciena implementation, we use FrameMaker to author and upload DITA content, and we use AM Guides for superior component content management system functions. Okay, now it's time for a demo. So in the interest of time, I opened up several tabs from AM Guides, and I will demo some of the features I described in my presentation. Okay, so in this routing and switching folder, I have many subfolders that correspond to the features for this product line. Now, we combine the various features into different DITA maps for our various output. So if I open one of these folders, I'll go to System Timing. These are all the DITA files that make up this feature, the submap for this feature. I can click one file and select Properties. And this will show all of the DITA maps that use this topic. So this is important because I know the impact that any changes I make will have on the various output DITA maps. Similarly, here I have a folder of conrefs, and I can click on a file here, select Properties, and I can see the DITA maps and files that reference this conref. I can also move files. So I will move this one file For example, if I didn't think about reuse when I was authoring this topic and then realized I need to reuse it in another data map or output, I can move this file to the common area where I store all my common content. So I click on Move, click Next, and I will place this file in my common folder. Then you'll see this Adjust Data References screen, and this shows the references from and the references to the selected file. So I'll keep all of these enabled, and all of my links will be adjusted. So all the links to that file are preserved. Next, I'll demonstrate how we edit files. You can always edit using AEM Guides, the XML editor in AEM Guides, or your selected data editor. We edit in FrameMaker, so I'll go ahead and click Open in FrameMaker. And because I have auto checkout enabled, I see this prompt. So I'll click Yes. And then I can go ahead and edit my file. I'll just refresh this node. Because I haven't made any changes, I'll just go ahead and cancel the checkout. And I'll just show you the auto checkout options. If you click Edit, Preferences, CMS, Adobe Experience Manager, the auto checkout options appear here. Next, I will demonstrate smart collections. So I can create a smart collection by clicking on Filter, and I'll create a collection of checked out content. So click Status, Checked Out, and you'll see the checked out files appear on the right. And I can also narrow down the search to my checked out files. And if I had other files that were checked out by someone else, they would not appear here. So these are all of my checked out files, and I can save this as a smart collection. Give it a name. I can click on Public to make this collection available to other users. So here I've narrowed down the search to a specific folder. But if I want to make that search a little bit wider, I will go up to my EN folder, click Select, and you'll see now that the checked out files area updates to show more files checked out by other users. So I can always access my smart collection once it's been created by navigating to the collections area. And this is the smart collection I just created. And this collection will dynamically update as I check out and check in files. I have another collection here. It's not a smart collection, it's a static collection. And I've used this collection to group the data maps that I modify often. So these data maps are all in different folders. Adding them to a collection doesn't move the files, but it creates an area where you can access them quickly. Okay, so now I will discuss version and release management using baselines. So here I have a DITA map. If I click on the DITA map, the DITA map console opens and I can click on the Baselines tab. And here you'll see that I already have a baseline for this DITA map that corresponds to a release 1 version of this DITA map. Now, after the release 1 version of this DITA map, I went ahead and modified a file and added a new label. You'll see here gs_1.1 for getting started guide, release 1.1. And you can see here the gs_1.0, which is the version of the file that was included in the release 1 DITA map. So to summarize, version 1.2 of this file was released with the release 1 version of the DITA map, and version 1.4 of this file is going to be released with release 1.1 of this DITA map. So I will go ahead and go back here. I will create another baseline for the release 1.1. So I will create, I'll give the baseline a name. And this time I will use labels to create the baseline. Now you will get this warning to indicate that if any of the files don't have the label that you selected, then the last persistent version of that topic will be included in the baseline for this DITA map. And here you can see the file that has the updated label. And looking at other labels, this indicates that these files were included in baselines for other DITA maps. So there's quite a bit of reuse going on here. I will save this DITA map. And I can also leverage the baseline in the translations. So if I move to the translation tab, I already translated release 1 of this DITA map, but now I will go ahead and pick up out of sync. So that's updated files since the last baseline, and missing copy, which would be new files since the last baseline, and use the baseline in my translation and click done. Okay. There. Okay, so now you can see that this one file, this is the file that I updated, is out of date. So it has changed since my last translation. So I will go ahead and send this one file to translation. And I will add it to my existing project, which is Getting Started French. So I'll click Start, and that one topic will be sent for translation. So this demonstrates that you don't have to send all of your topics for translation if you haven't updated all of them. You can just select the ones that have changed by leveraging baselines in your translation. So now I will talk about the publishing. So we support, AEM supports the current publishing workflows. And since we use FrameMaker, we also publish with FrameMaker. So if I click on the DITA map and go to, I'll show an example of HTML5. We have FrameMaker Publishing Server. configured here, and an STS file. So I can use my existing STS files that I created when I was publishing locally on my local machine using FrameMaker. I can still use those when publishing from FrameMaker Publishing Server. So I can go ahead and generate. Now I will go to the area on the AEM server where my published items get stored in the FM Data Outputs folder. I created HTML5, and here it is as a zip file. So I can download this. So I'll just give that a minute to complete. Show in folder. I can unzip this. And launch it. So here is my HTML5. If I had several STS files, I can toggle between the STS files that I need. The STS files include the formatting and the branding that I want to use in my output. And now I will show one of the reports that we use. So if you click on Tools and go to XML Documentation, you have several reports here. I will show the Content Reuse report. And I can navigate to a folder that corresponds to a product line to show the reuse for that product line. I will go to the area where I store process guides for our data authoring and generate the reuse report. So here I can see I have about 20% reuse, and you can scroll down the report to see the number of times each topic has been reused. So I hope you found this demo helpful, and thank you for being here.
Hello and welcome to my session for Adobe DITAWorld 2022, and the session is it safe to mention DITA in polite society? Goodness me, what do I mean by that? Today I'm going to just cover a few ideas around some of the analogies you might use for DITA. And some things that we really do feel are important that we need to be sharing and talking to our senior managers. And don't lose your head, which will make sense as we go through some of the slides. But first of all, who am I? My name's Julian Murfitt. I work for a company called Mecon. In fact, I started the company with my brother back in 1990. So half of my life has been working in the create, manage and deliver sector. And that's really started out with FrameMaker, actually FrameMaker 3, running through to now AEM guides in 2022. But if I'm not working, actually you might find me upside down flying aircraft, or more recently, less of the competitions and actually teaching people how to safely fly inverted. So that's really my passion, if we can get away from work from time to time. So what are we talking about today? Well, it's a communication issue, I think. And the first question then is, who are we communicating with? And I think it's the senior management. This is not our customers I'm talking about. This is who we as people in the technical communications sector or departments, who are we communicating to, and who are we trying to convince? And that's senior managers, engineers, and they can be scared off with some of the technical detail. And certainly they're impressed by shiny toys. So what's new? What's a trend? And they can be influenced by maybe some of the non-believers and those that are ignorant about the sort of world we live in this DITA space. So we need to be careful not to scare the horses. But they all like a story. And this starts with the XML piece. XML is the start of the scare. And a good story around this, I think, is one from a friend of mine, Noel Zabina. And he was saying that one of his friends said, you talking to a chap who was a JSON developer, said, you must meet Noz. He's into XML. And that's similar to you, right? And to which he said, XML, does he drive a car where he puts his feet through the floor and pushes himself along? Well, I think that's a pretty unfair thought if you're into XML that you would do that. And I think this is a bit of JSON developer snobbery and actually a bit of ignorance of what really XML is about. And I would say that we should think about XML as just a form of communication, a bit like the written word. So think as XML is how we communicate in a way that we speak and use words, the written page, where we join a bunch of letters together. And when we join them in the right way, they make words that we understand, okay? A language. And we have rules that allow us to communicate those words. And that might be, therefore, the Rosetta Stone is more akin to XML than the Flintstones. So what do we mean by that? Well, if you think of JSON, that's lightweight interchange format, okay? Doesn't do semantics, though, so well. And it's not really designed for metadata, but it is simple to understand. And it's great for the web and JavaScript and things like that. So, it's a great language. Whereas XML is another language, I would see JSON as a bit more like emojis. It's a good, simple way to communicate. But it lacks some of the finesse. And so you can get quite a lot across in a very quick way. Well, if we look at DITA and say, okay, XML is this written communication. If we then think DITA, we can consider that like a language. So if we were talking in French or English or German. And so I'm thinking it's a set of rules that say if you join these letters up in a certain order, you'll make words that follow those rules and sentences that follow those rules. And then we have a language. And therefore, I can think of French being DITA, and therefore S1000D is another XML standard that maybe like English. The two are not directly compatible, but they might have similarities, like table or une table is actually a different way of pronouncing the same word, same set of letters joined together, but actually they're done in a subtly different way. So that's quite a nice way to explain that, first of all, we have XML, then we have DITA, which is a flavor of XML, which is a set of rules around that. So if we take that another step further, you might have heard Lego being used to describe DITA. In fact, there are a number of people that have used this in presentations, so I'm certainly not leading the way with this. But I do like it as a way to describe DITA, because people like Noz have done presentations, and Soren you may have seen, a number of people have done this. And essentially what we're saying is that Lego forms little blocks. What I like about this is that each one of these blocks that you can see on the screen here are created to a very specific specification. And that specification allows them all to join and interplay with each other. And if they didn't follow the specification, then they wouldn't plug in. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Right. And so then you can join those pieces. As long as you write your content using those rules, we can then collect them together and then tell stories. And we can use those same blocks, those same pieces, and reorganize them, rearrange them, and we can tell a different story. But don't be thinking that that means you can't do things like JSON, because actually you could produce the JSON just as easily, because actually that's a dumbing down. You can have a simple block form that you might have that JSON supports that still can then be used in other ways. So actually to suggest that JSON is more sophisticated is somewhat incorrect. In fact, it's not somewhat, it's completely incorrect. And XML is actually more powerful. So let's explore that a little further. The only thing I'd say about DITA, though, is that there is a notion that you migrate to DITA. And I don't think we should be saying that. If you consider something that migrates, a bird, it moves from one country to another, a place that perhaps is warmer, where there's more food available. And when it gets there, it's a little tired and it's a little thirsty, but it's still a bird. Whereas, in fact, when you migrate to DITA, you're actually doing a metamorphic change. You're moving to a completely different thing. And it's quite nice if you think about the metamorphic vision that you see on the screen, that you're moving from this caterpillar, this wobbling around, munching away, all of this content in an old, unstructured way. And then it turns into this beautiful butterfly that is much more mobile and free to fly. And so I think it's quite a nice metaphor or maybe analogy to say that DITA. But it does mean that we have to go through a lot of energy to make that move. And there are other phrases that are coming up these days that I wanted to touch on because it's really what is important. Content operations, you'll hear. And content operations is nice because it's really saying it's a new way to perhaps describe what we used to say as create, manage, deliver. It's more than that, I'm sure, and it covers other silos and touches other points within the business. But essentially, it's not conflicting with our world of DITA. It actually could be used within that context, and that's fine. Content as a service, perhaps, is another thing. I don't think that's a big change, but it's a new way to say that we are actually serving content, and there are maybe APIs and tools that we use to do that. But then you start touching into the headless CMS area. And I'm going to come back to headless CMS because this is a little bit of a bone of contention for me. Semantic modeling. Now, that is a big thing. And a lot of people, it's not new, but it's certainly something that we talk a lot about in this documentation world. I didn't hear anyone talking about semantic modeling back in the old desktop publishing days in the 80s, but now we certainly are talking about that. So it's not a new concept, but it's new in our space. And knowledge graphs and building a better and more comprehensive relationship of different pieces of information and how they interrelate to each other is big. And because of that, we might talk about taxonomy in a moment. But virtual reality, blended reality, these are new things that we're needing to deal with. And so we definitely need to understand them and how they work with in our world, maybe in XML and DITA. And the digital twin, well, I must say the digital twin is definitely not new, although it's being talked about now as if it's a new thing. Being in the aviation industry, I can tell you that digital twins have been around a long time. All aircraft have simulators. The Wright brothers perhaps didn't have a simulator for their aircraft, but certainly now all modern aircraft have simulators, so you can train and trial them early. So it's not a new concept. But tech writers, this is an interesting one because I've noticed that the idea of tech writers is changing. Are they still around? And if you know, Keith Shingley Roberts writes a blog, and he noticed that since 2012, there's been a slow decline in the number of job adverts being posted for technical writers, and therefore you might wonder what is going on there. And I don't think that's because there are less technical writers in the world. In fact, there is a need and possibly more awareness of the fact that they are vital in the whole communication to our customers. So where have they gone? Well, I think they just renamed themselves. They're being called content engineers, information designers, and I'm sure you can think of some others. Do post some other things that you think you're being called now in this industry. And so then you might go, well, where's the yacht rock coming from? Well, yacht rock is another example of this new name for an old thing. If you've never heard of it, go and Google yacht rock. It's a genre which actually was coined in about 2005. And yet actually it describes music like Steely Dan from back in the 70s and 80s. So it's an old music, but replayed with a new description of the genre. And now it's got a new kind of a new surge of interest. And so I like the idea that we are using new phrases to describe things, yeah, even though it's still the same job. Omnichannel is a bit like this for me, although I would be lambasted probably by the Omnichannel X conference to say, oh, it's a lot more than that. And I would agree that there is more to omnichannel than just multi-channel on steroids. And yet, actually, it's not a bad way to describe it, because we are talking about delivering content to multiple channels. Yes, maybe for subtly different reasons. And do you know what? Omnichannel is another step forward, but many companies are still challenged and trying to get their head around just the omnichannel bit. I mean, the multi-channel bit. And that means they're still trying to get the information consistent. And one of the issues about consistency is this semantics that I was talking about earlier. And this, therefore, is a word that we do need to get our head around and be comfortable with talking about. And it crosses all the boundaries, whether you're a headless, whether you're a web CMS, whether you're a DITA CMS, whether you're working with XML or JSON. You do need to be looking at semantics. And the reason for this is really what gives the intelligence to the content so that computers can read and understand and interpret that information more so than we can as, certainly that humans can do that already. Computers are not very good at it. And if you've got unstructured content, then sure, you need to use NLP, natural language processing, artificial intelligence. And yes, you can then use tools like Pool Party that do this very well. But actually, if you've got structure, you can still use Pool Party. And this is where enterprise taxonomy comes in. Enterprise taxonomy is going to help you with that search. And it's really about getting consistency in your language. A little bit on the taxonomy is it's about getting consistent values for the metadata that you're using. And you can see this taxonomy layer in this diagram that was created by Judy Verno some years ago. And it's feeding into the metadata layer, which then feeds into your platforms that you're using to distribute the content. And so if we have a consistent set of terms, then we're going to get better search and more consistent search, but also synonyms and maybe polyhierarchical terms. And these are the things that are going to really make a difference. And so this is a good area to say, to be comfortable that taxonomy, regardless of the sort of technology that we're working with, is actually important. And there are tools, as I say, like Pool Party that will help us do that. So let's move to this headless thing. Headless CMSs, in many ways, have been around for years, but they've got a new renaissance, and it's a bit like the electric car. First invented in 1839, very interesting during the 1900s, because petroleum, gasoline, was actually in real short demand, short supply, and therefore you couldn't get a hold of it. And the idea of the electric car looked really good, but it was expensive, and the technology wasn't really there. And I think this is like headless. In fact, headless went away for a while when the web CMS came of age, because it was the web that we were feeding. So why not have a system that directly fed that CMS and that website, and the web was our main driver. But then we started to realize that we needed many more formats and outputs. And so actually the headless CMS came back. And so what actually is a headless CMS? Well, it's a container, a content management system that allows you to separate content from form. Interesting. I've heard that before. And actually, it allows you to arrange content in blocks. These blocks are not quite as sophisticated as topics that you do in XML, but they are nonetheless blocks that you can, if you model it correctly and create your own set of models, that you can actually create quite a sophisticated structure. And then you can use APIs, REST APIs, to create any output that you like. So you have a toolkit of way of carving that word up so that you can deliver it appropriately. Okay, so if you have those skills, then you can indeed also tell a story. And that story, maybe I don't think as sophisticated. I'm a little bit mean here with my little story picture there. But actually, yes, you can build the story, but there are no standards. And you've got to build the information model in order to be able to structure that. So actually sharing that content with other people is not quite so easy as you might think. It's an exchange language, and so at the very basic level, it's very easy to exchange. But unless you exchange some of the information model with it, then actually, what are you exchanging? Whereas with DITA, we have a really sophisticated exchange language and a really great architecture. So I'm not so convinced that headless is better. And it's certainly not as semantically as capable. But wait a minute. DITA and the concept of DITA CMS, what is that exactly? In fact, if we look at that, it is a place where we can store content in blocks, or topics as we would call them, and it is more semantically rich, and it does separate content from form, and it actually allows us to publish to multiple channels. And it has an architecture that is already there and is very capable for evolution. And actually, you can save it, output it to JSON. So where's the problem? And why aren't we thinking, when people say, oh, we need a headless CMS, why aren't we saying, well, yeah, we have a DITA CMS, and that is pretty headless, right? It allows us to have quite a lot of flexibility. And it's as more powerful than some of the traditional headless CMS that use maybe DocBook or Markdown. It's only a shame that lightweight DITA is not being used in some of these headless CMSs, and then maybe we would have less of a challenge. And that nicely brings us on to AEM Guides, which you'll now know is the new name for the XML capable addition to the AEM suite. And AEM Guides is a very powerful, fully capable DITA CCMS. And that means it actually is providing us the basic architecture for a headless CMS. And it allows us to plug it into AEM sites, which means we have really good access to an AEM, a web architecture. And it also allows us to publish it to many other different formats because of the open toolkit and the capability that gives us. So I quite like the idea that it's a bit like a headless CMS. And if therefore IT are pushing on that, we can say maybe they can sit together. In fact, maybe you have a traditional JSON-based or Markdown-based headless CMS sitting next to a more sophisticated architecture using DITA for some of the more technical requirements of our content. And while we're in there, maybe we can explore a little bit of a plug for some of our technology, but where we're enhancing that, and certainly within the AEM space, we talked about taxonomy and the need for that. And yes, there is definitely a need for a separate architecture, or separate system, I should say, to manage our taxonomy. And if you're using Pool Party, you can share that taxonomy with your AEM sites and AEM guides architecture and system using Semantic Booster. Allows you to pull that in and take advantage of the power of polyhierarchical taxonomy terms and synonyms, and using that to increase your search and capability, and use that same taxonomy in other systems like SharePoint or other platforms like SAP, for instance. And indeed, if you are using AEM guides. You might also be needing something very specific for your engineering and your field engineers and content as a service to perhaps have a dedicated mobile app, which goes beyond what might be normally available on your website. And in that case, you might want something like Cogility, which is one of our products, and there are other tools for sure out there. But this is really taking the power of a very capable, dedicated system for doing something specific, but taking the power of that XML, DITA, semantic-rich content in AEM guides and publishing it to other channels. And therefore, our omni-channel architecture is starting to blossom. So let's get back to some of those other DITA concepts that perhaps some of us are challenged in when we describe them. And one of those is information architecture. We'll definitely hear people talk about this. If you're implementing DITA, it's likely that your consultant, and certainly if you're working with MECOM, will be saying to you, you need to think about your information architecture. And you might well then say, well, what is that and why do I need it? Well, the thing about DITA is it is very extensive, and therefore you need to refine and tune and focus what you're doing. Much like when you're building a house. If you wanted to build a house, you don't just go and get a load of concrete blocks like JSON blocks or blocks in your headless CMS and just put them together and hope that it builds a house. You're going to think about what your requirement is. And the nice thing about DITA is there are many, many options. You might have concrete forms, SIPs, you might have cavity wall insulation, you might have concrete blocks and facing bricks. All of these types of building materials are available within your DITA architecture. And you then choose the most appropriate. And then you think about how you're going to use this information. You think about how you're going to live in the house. Who's going to live in the house? Do you need bathrooms? Do you need kitchens? Do you need a corridor from one room to another? These are all notions that you would think of if you were going to build a building of some description. And this is no different from thinking about your life cycle of content in terms of your content output going to various other forms, whether that be, as I say, an omni-channel. You need to be thinking about that delivery before you create the content to make sure it has the right semantics and therefore it's fit for purpose. And so creating an information architecture is one of the first foundation blocks, and creating that blueprint will be able to set you how you're going to move forward. But what about keys and maps? Well, I'm going to invite you to come up with some ideas as well and put them in the chat. Keys are quite an extensive and one of the more complicated things for people to get their head around within DITA. And I'd like to hear your ideas of what analogy you might use to describe a key. And also maps. I mean, people say, oh, well, you could say a map is like a map. Well, that's true, although a map doesn't really, like a geographic map, doesn't really explain a map in DITA. It's more of a container, okay? So we need a good analogy for that. And actually a recipe is probably a better way to describe that. But in fact, a recipe has steps, and so that's not strictly what a map is. And so it's more like the table of contents and an index or a glossary, in fact, that says these are the pieces that make up my story, and therefore these are all the components, and then that's how we're going to publish it. So maybe that's better. But I'd like to hear your ideas. I'd like to hear the chat. Do send them forward and let me know. What about specialization? This is a bit of a dirty word in many consultant areas that I hear about. Quite a lot of DITA specialists will say, no, we don't like to specialize. We like to say out of the box, it's clean, it's good. Yeah, I think that's a bit unfair. I mean, one of the things about DITA is it has this specialization capability. And so I don't think we should be scared of it, but we should also be mindful of not going mad. If you're going back to the building analogy, if you want something custom, it's going to cost you more. If you can have something off the shelf, it's going to be quicker and easier. But sometimes you really do need that custom thing. Maybe it's special thresholds to allow you to get your wheelchair in. And that customization makes it more usable for you. Well, if that's what you need, then that's what you have. And the good thing about DITA is it allows you to have that. So here's a real example of a specialization we did for IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards. And I won't go into the detail of this because it might take a little bit too long, but the principle is that they have a paragraph, which normally we think of a paragraph as like a P, and therefore it's one piece. But actually, they have a paragraph which is a collection of information, and that's how they communicate it. So we created a specialization for them. And we can come back to the Lego here and say, just think of it as taking the same specification so that it still has the little bumps you can see on the top of that window, but it actually has a different form, it has a different shape, it has a different purpose, and therefore it can be plugged into all of the other pieces of our collection of Lego pieces, but it can help tell a different story. And I think that therefore is quite a nice way to illustrate it. So don't be scared of specialization, but be careful not to go mad. A bit like reuse. You do not want to be reusing down to the tiny little elements, but equally, the power of that might be that you do want to be able to reuse to some level. We have had customers where they've over reused, and now in their re-evaluation, maybe 4 or 5 years later, they're reducing the amount of reuse. They're reducing the amount of specialization, and that's because they're learning more about it. So, that might be good. So in summary, well, DITA, sadly, is not as cool as JSON. It doesn't sound as cool, does it? To say, hey, I do JSON, does sound quite nice. Whereas DITA sounds a little bit more harsh. And actually, we have another problem because people don't always know what to call it, because some people call it DITA and some people call it DITA. So if you don't even know how to call it, then it's a bit hard to know how to communicate that in a good way. And XML certainly is a scary space, and it does blow people's mind. Certainly managers are going to be scared of that, and developers go, oh no, it's old hat. Well, it's not old hat. It's still more powerful than many of the things that are around today. And so let's still use it. And lightweight DITA, lightweight sounds a bit lightweight, doesn't it? And so it's probably being underplayed. So I think we have a branding problem. We need the marketeers to come and help us to give it some new virile kind of our energy behind it to make it more interesting and fun. So we need a new name maybe for DITA. We need the content operations for the DITA world. So come up with some new ideas, give us some new names, and maybe we can re-energize it. Do contact me and send me your ideas. Post them in the chat here, and we'll see if we can pick them up today. And I'd love to hear, and I'll do a blog post and think a bit more about this. Having new analogies as well. Any other new analogies you can think of when you're explaining DITA and your business process, I'd love to hear them. And it will really help us to share those ideas so that we can communicate this amazing power that we have in DITA in a new fun way. Have a great conference and enjoy the rest of the sessions that Adobe are running, and we look forward to hearing from you and engaging with you in the future.
Joining my second talk at DITA World, and thank you Adobe for having me in this DITA conference. It's a pleasure to speak at this great Adobe event today. Let's talk about API documentation and how we at CRX.net decouple software development from software documentation processes and releases. If you joined my keynote yesterday, where I told you about how important it is to build content bridges with standardized interfaces, today you will see how we at CRX.net walk the talk and how we let content flow like water in practice. My name is Markus Wiedenmeier. I'm CEO at CRX.net. We provide technology for automation of technical documentation processes. We believe that information must not be buried in silos, in proprietary systems, but must find its way to users in linked and structured way. That's why we have developed solutions that make this possible. With our modular data services, we integrate information and systems. We ensure that data becomes information and information becomes knowledge. We integrate any kind of inputs, formats, or any systems to let content flow. We have developed systems to let content flow where it is needed in specific situations. Today we talk about what is the OpenAPI specification, why writing is not necessarily the job of developers. We talk about some basics about data reuse mechanisms and especially about conrep-push, the most unknown and underestimated feature in DITA. Then let's see how we at CRX.net decouple development and documentation processes, and how this approach can look like in Adobe Experience Manager. First, let's see what the OpenAPI is. And when we are talking about APIs today, we are talking about REST APIs. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And it is a software architecture, a concept for distributed systems using the HTTP protocol. OpenAPI is a standard maintained by the OpenAPI initiative. It is a collaboration project of the Linux Foundation. It was getting a single project in 2016. And it previously was part of the Swagger framework. It is a description format for API services in an open and vendor-neutral way. Talking about API in this case means APIs of RESTful services. OpenAPI specification is programming language agnostic, and clients can understand and consume services without knowledge of their implementation. Usually, exchange format is JSON when we are talking about connection between services. And there are a lot of implementations available, like Swagger, the most famous implementation available, where code and documentation is built and published automatically. Let's take our CRX IDS Content API as a sample. CRX IDS is a cloud system providing content as a service based on the German TCOM standard IRRDS. This is such API data looks like in JSON representation, which is generated automatically from our source code. So we have information about the version of the specification, information about the API itself, the root URL to access the API, information about certain API endpoints, and information about certain authorization modes. Further, we see information about a certain endpoint, information about the parameters of this endpoint, and information about the response the endpoint delivers after executions. So it's the result of the request. And we find a lot of descriptions for any entity in our API which were written by developers. Descriptions of endpoints are delivered automatically to the outside within our daily build process. Here we see how this looks like. Written in C#, our main programming language for the endpoint IRRDS information units. And here we see how this looks like for a single parameter. It's the embed parameter within the IRRDS information unit endpoint. We refer to this parameter in our further example. Beside the machine-readable JSON representation, we also get the human-readable HTML. And this is how the process looks like to generate machine and human-readable content automatically from source code. In daily build processes, an intermediate format, in our case it's XML, is generated. This XML is used by the integrated Swagger component, and Swagger renders this data to JSON and HTML depending on the client which is requesting a certain format. Great, developer teams, leaders would say. Developers write documentation when they are writing their code. Both go together in one. Not much additional effort, right? Let's see why it's not a good idea to let 2 jobs or 2 rows done by one single person. To put it in at once, there are developers who are writing good documentation, of course. But I want to target this generality of developers. To be clear, I think you would not agree in general when I would say technical writers are good developers, right? So let's see why developers should not write end-user documentation, in my opinion. Developers should not write because they are paid for developing cool features in our software. They are not getting paid for writing documentation at first. Developers have poor skills in writing end-user documentation, in general at least. And they are too deep into their problem domain. I think that's the most important point here, as it's very hard to get out to another perspective. And what is cool for developers is not even cool for others, right? Due to this, source code comments are not useful for end users as we are too deep in developers' domain. So when we want to have good documentation, let even here do professionals their job. People who have learned what they are doing. And we learned that great content is of great value, a value which provides great user experience. We don't want mistakes in documentation lead to new software releases just because there are a bug in the documentation, or even worse, to delay our software release. Guess what will win when it comes down to a decision? But of course, this doesn't mean that developers are not responsible to provide information in a written form. They are responsible to act as digital information providers. Digital is important here, as we want to exchange information not in a meeting. Information must flow through our systems. So let's see how we can bring both worlds together in a decoupled way. But let's go one step back and let's bring DITA reuse mechanism back to our mind. When we are talking about DITA and reuse, reuse is the reason why we are all using DITA, isn't it? We have following options to reuse content. We have keyref mechanisms to support content variables. We have conref mechanism to reuse content fragments. We have conref key ref mechanisms to reuse variable content fragments, and we have conref push, the mechanism which is key to success today in our topic here. The key to success in our approach is conref push mechanism. One of the most unknown and most underestimated features in DITA, I think. What is conref push? It's simple. It's just the opposite way of reusing content. It is overwriting our standard documentation in custom scenarios. But what is conrefing about? The normal way we are reusing content in most cases. Let's see first how conrefing works. When we use conref, we build up a warehouse which contains reusable content like warnings, for examples. Warehouse sounds very complex at this point, but you could imagine simply as a topic containing hazard statements. And this is just referenced in a DITA map. This DITA map represents our manual for product A, where we have product-specific, topic-oriented content. When we need a warning which is stored in our reuse warehouse, we simply refer to this warning and add a reference to it. And this way we ensure data integrity and save costs for redundant content. An approach that saves efforts and money in translation processes at the very latest. Then we create a second manual for product B, which is completely different to product A. But at some points, we need same content. In this case, we reuse the same hazard statement and reference it to the second documentation. This is very simple to understand, I think. Conrefing just means to refer to some content which is stored and maintained somewhere else. As I told you with conref push, we need to switch our kind of thinking by 180 degrees. Let's think this way. We are developing a standard product, which is shipped to our customers out of the box. And so this product comes with a standard documentation. Take FrameMaker, RoboHelp, or cloud systems like AEM or Crex.net as an example. Have a look at this documentation and you know what I'm talking about. But systems like AEM or even Crex.net are highly customizable to fit customers' specific needs. They can be extended with other features to integrate in your company's infrastructure. So vendors have partners to implement such systems in a highly complex project. This project needs documentation as well. But no one wants to rewrite standard content for standard use cases again. It's also not a good idea to ship two documentations to customers and let the user decide where to find the right content, as this will give a very bad user experience. Users nowadays expect one documentation for their certain system. Therefore, project team wants to replace existing content if part of a topic describes different in a situation. And they want to extend existing content if there is more to say as the standard documentation explains. To solve this, project team creates a DITA map for their project-specific documentation. Standard DITA map is referenced in the project Next, we add one or more empty reuse topics to our project map. This topic is where conref push mechanism happens, where we add new or override existing standard content. As you see, our project documentation will have project-specific areas, which should be replaced or should be extended. So we want to reuse our complete standard documentation and extend or replace what does not fit in this certain project context. This is what conref push does. It replaces or adds, extends content in a project documentation. If we want to extend a standard description, we conref the section from the standard documentation in our reuse topic. After that, we add an attribute con action to write content which is added before or after this section. And we add a con action attribute with a value replace to override certain section with project-specific content. And now let's assume for our further discussions in this sessions about OpenAPI documentation, the developer documentation is our standard documentation and end user documentation is project documentation. And now, after we have got the basics of reusing content with DITA, now let's talk about the process, as even automation is our topic. Within our daily build processes, Swagger documentation is updated on our server. Xerox.net fetches the JSON files and converts the structured data to DITA. A map with a lot of topics for each endpoint is generated. And DITA skeletons, our reuse topics, are generated. These reuse topics now conref descriptions from API our developers have written. As we want to override this developer content, an attribute con action with value replace is added. This automatic generated content is imported to AEM. And Regine, our technical writer, can now override descriptions created by developers to provide great and high quality end user documentation. Let's see how the result looks like after DITA files are imported in IEM. This is the DITA map we generated from the JSON file automatically. You see the reuse topic conrefing description of the embed parameter in the IRRDS information units endpoint written by our developers, which is overwritten by Regine, our technical writer. This is the DITA map which is automatically generated. And this is our standard documentation, if you remember. It also contains reuse topic to replace or add content with conref push mechanism. And here is our complete project documentation. Documentation containing samples, use cases, and the API descriptions. And the cool thing here is that we can directly refer to API descriptions within our use case documentation. This result is our product standard documentation, which can even be reused in real projects to document project-specific things without losing big value of the standard. Within the attribute inspector, you see that we conref developer documentation, which was originally comments in source code, as you remember. And in this specific case, we always want to replace comments written by the developers. So we set connection attribute to push replace. Here you see the original comment from our source code our developers have written. And this is the changes we really made to fit end users' needs. Well structured and well written. And the best thing is, all is connected with developer source code, but it's decoupled, as Regine can correct things in documentation without the need of changing the source code, and without the requirement of new builds just because there are bugs in the documentation. And by the way, this all works in any XML DITA environments which supports conref push mechanisms. And now let's generate some outputs to PDF and DITA Open Toolkit standard. To HTML5, even with the DITA OT standard. And of course, as we are in AEM, we publish to AEM sites. And here we go. Publishing process takes a while as we have a lot of data. We have about 400 single topics which are conrefed and connected with each other. Most of them are automatically generated from our JSON document we get from Swagger. We have our end user documentation as our end users expects it in PDF. You see the description for the embed parameter Regine has overwritten before. It's not the developer's comment anymore. As end users expect this in HTML5 output as well, of course, same overwritten content is available here. No additional effort. Of course, publishing this content from AEM also works with FrameMaker publishing server, which looks much nicer in the result, of course. And this is how the result looks like in IEM sites. As you can see, if you deal with standards and use features these standards provide out of the box, output is no longer a problem. And via a smart process design, editorial offered and communication is reduced to a minimum in a project-specific environment. All participants are connected yet decoupled and can focus on their job. But I think there's something still missing, and this is getting pretty cool. Of course, our Swagger documentation needs to get updated as well. And this is where we started, right? And this is what we or our users expect. High quality content, even in OpenAPI documentation. What do we need to do to get this stuff working, to get this content back to the Swagger HTML file? No, we don't update our source code, of course. You remember we want to decouple releases for development and technical documentation. And this is what we did so far. We converted OpenAPI JSON files to DITA. We replaced some developer descriptions by technical writers in AEM. And then we published this great value content to HTML5, PDF, and AEM sites. Now let's publish this content back to the Cirex.net IDS Content API. You remember the system with an API and its documentation we used today in this presentation. Now simply extend Swagger UI with some JavaScripts which connect to the Cirex.net API and fetches the descriptions from the Information Units API endpoint. How could you call this? Self-document system? This is just how content as a service should work. It should provide information to whomever content needs and let them integrate your content. With some simple JavaScripts, we can override Swagger standard descriptions with the content created by a team of technical writers, just on demand. As soon as technical writers update the documentation and publish to Xerox.net IDS, documentation in Swagger is up to date without the need of changes in source code. Developers and writers are working together, but their processes and releases are decoupled from each other. By the way, this all doesn't mean developers shouldn't care anymore about. Of course, they should, as they have to provide necessary information via an organizational and technical interface. So let's summarize. Let's use the skills of developers and technical writers. Let's decouple software development and software documentation, releases, and processes. Let us use standards with features which are there for so many years. And let's start automation and integration of content. You find a lot of information about this and other stuff on our blog. Even some topics about conref and conref push. And now follow us on social media. We are happy to get in touch with you and continue our discussion. Now in the chat room or later on the social networks. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest of this great conference. Thank you very much.
Hello, and welcome to my presentation about data intelligence for Adobe Experience Manager. How to use data metadata to improve the customer experience. What will we talk about today? After a short introduction of myself and my company, Parson, I will give a short recap about metadata in general. What is metadata and why should you care? Why is metadata important? Then we will have a look at metadata in AEM. Where do you encounter metadata? What kind of metadata is available in AEM by default? How can you use and manage metadata in AEM? After that, we will have a closer look at data metadata in AEM in particular. And finally, we will look beyond data, how you can consolidate metadata from different content sources by using an international metadata standard like IIRDS. Let's start with the introduction. My name is Frank Ralph. I have been working as a technical consultant for Parson since 2014. My main focus is on information architecture, metadata modeling, the optimization of documentation workflows, and data authoring environments. My team and I created several sets of data example content for AEM guides, the component formerly called XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager. We did this to test and develop advanced data features for AEM. My company Parson is a small technical consulting company. Parson was founded in 2006. It is based in Hamburg in the northern part of Germany. We are experts for all aspects of technical communication and provide documentation, consulting services, development, and also training. Parson is one of the leading providers of solutions for smart content and intelligent information, and we also offer sustainable strategies for the digitalization of content processes. Parson believes in the power of open standards and is therefore one of the leading data ambassadors in Europe. And we were also founding members and contributor to IIRDS, the international standard for intelligent information request and delivery. Let's talk about metadata. Why metadata? What is metadata and why should you care? Simply put, metadata is data about data. Metadata provides additional information about your content, and metadata can provide the underlying semantics for your content. In most of the cases, metadata is invisible, but that does not mean that it is not important, and we will see later on why this is so. Metadata can be part of the content itself. That is the case, for example, with DITA, or the metadata can be stored separately from the content, for example, in a CCMS like AEM. Here's an example with extensive DITA metadata. This is a machinery task with metadata elements from the DITA task requirements domain that describe how to connect the stepper motor of a gantry robot. So here's some of the metadata from this DITA document, the required conditions that must be fulfilled before you can start the task, what support equipment is required for this task, which tools do you need, then the required personnel, how many people do you need to perform the task, what is their skill level, and what is the estimated time to perform this task. For example, are there any supplies needed for this task? So you see, there's quite a lot of metadata in this topic. And why is this important? Well, without the underlying metadata and the underlying semantics, the content can become completely meaningless. If you render just the content without the metadata, you see only a list of the seemingly unrelated items, and you cannot really figure out what each of these items means. So better use and display the metadata of such a topic. In addition to this basic and fundamental function of metadata, which is the providing of important semantics, there are of course other uses of metadata. One very important one is that metadata can be used for search facets and filtering. And metadata can help you to provide targeted information to your users. In this case, the expanded DITA metadata allows version presentation of content either by the audience or product, for example. So now let's look at metadata, how you encounter it in AEM and how it is handled in AEM. If the first thing you'll notice is that metadata in AEM comes under a number of different names. Depending on the context, it is called metadata, it can be called properties. You will encounter tags, predicates, and sometimes it's also talk about whole complete taxonomies. But basically, it always means data about data. So let's have a look where you encounter metadata when you work in AEM. The first thing is in the asset view. The asset view provides a number of metadata presented as a number of separated tabs. And you can see that's really a lot of metadata AEM already provides out of the box. This can be simple metadata, basic metadata like the title of an asset, or more complex metadata like camera data when the asset, for example, is a photo. You use this metadata in AEM when searching for assets. In that case, the metadata provides facets for filtering and for focusing your search and filtering the search results. There's a special kind of metadata available in AEM that's called tags. Tags are part of the metadata set in the asset view, and they provide they can be used for search filters as well, and they also provide a mechanism for AEM to deliver targeted content to your audiences. Here's an example how to use tags as search filters as seen by the end user. So now that we have seen how metadata is used in AEM, let's look at how to manage that metadata in AEM. The first thing is the so-called metadata schemas. You can use these metadata schemas to define the interface to manage asset metadata. You can either modify existing metadata schemas or you can create metadata schemas from scratch in AEM. To this end, there's a special metadata schema form editor where you can create a schema with separate tabs, and you have the option to add a number of fields to each of these tabs, and each field is mapped to a metadata or a property available in AEM under the hood. To apply metadata to your content or to create different metadata sets for different kinds of content, there's another mechanism available in AEM. It's called metadata profiles. Metadata profiles allow you to apply different metadata sets to your assets. For example, camera data is only relevant for photos, but not for data files. And you can use these metadata profiles to automatically set default values to all assets in a folder. And the applied metadata profile for a given folder is shown in the asset view as well. We've already seen that metadata is used as facets for the asset search, and you can configure that as well in AEM. You can define and modify the search forms available in AEM with a special search forms editor. You do so similar to the metadata schemas by adding fields to the search forms and mapping those fields to property settings and properties available in AEM. For each property setting, you see this on the right side here, there are additional settings depending on how you want the search to behave. We've already looked at tagging, how it is used and in AEM. Let's have a look at how tagging is managed and defined in the back end of AEM. You have the possibility to define your own taxonomies as hierarchical tags in AEM. When doing so, the first level is treated as a namespace, and then you can add as many hierarchical levels to your tags as you like. Tags are actually the easiest way to define your own set of metadata in AEM because they can be configured in the back end, while other enhancements and additions to the metadata mechanisms require more complex configuration or even development effort. We will see that later on when we're talking about DITA metadata in AEM. So under the hood, you will notice that tags are also stored differently or separately from other metadata in AEM. Okay, so now let's switch to specifically DITA metadata in AEM. Let's have a look how DITA metadata is handled, managed in AEM. We at Parson have created a set of DITA sample files to test and develop advanced DITA features for AEM. Here are some of these samples. There are 3 sample files for 3 industries. This is for the machinery industry, sample of an electro-pneumatic gantry robot. There's a lot of technical details in there. Then we created a user manual for a fictional smart security software. And finally, from the finance industry, a sample for a car insurance knowledge base. So when we look at the way metadata is encoded and presented in DITA files, there's a number of options available. One is, for example, that you can add profiling attributes in a DITA map. This is metadata that can be used, for example, for filtering and the output and provide targeted information to your users. And there's, of course, also the possibility to add metadata to DITA topics. The metadata DITA topic can have additional metadata that you might want to use as information in AEM, but that will depend on your use case. So let's have a look at a bit more complex DITA metadata example, because metadata DITA file can contain a lot of metadata. For example, this example from the software documentation, we have the change history, we have some copyright information, we have information about the creation and modification dates, and we have additional product information provided as metadata in the DITA map. So what you have to do is you have to decide which of all these metadata elements you actually need and want to use within AEM. Let's look at an example, because some of the metadata is probably not needed at all, so you can ignore it. Some metadata might be better handled by AEM itself, because there's already a similar metadata mechanism available there. But on the other hand, there might be useful information in the DITA files themselves that you want to make available to the user for enhancing the user experience. Okay, let's look at the example. In this case, the creation and modification dates probably could better be handled by AEM, because there's already a lot of metadata available that tracks modification dates and creation dates in the workflow. So this probably is a candidate to not use directly and from the DITA file. But on the other hand, the supported platforms, as they are provided in the product information, could be very useful search facets. So this might be metadata from the DITA content that you would like to expose to the users of AEM. When you look under the hood, you will notice that DITA metadata in AEM is stored and treated separately from other metadata in AEM. So each item in the AEM system has two nodes, one for DITA meta and one for the other metadata information available in AEM. And what's really important is that the DITA metadata is not available by default, but requires prior customization to make it actually available to your users. That's of course because all the metadata that is available in a DITA file, as we have seen, might not be really useful for you. So this must be decided on a case by case, and you have to customize your AEM instance accordingly. To make DITA metadata available in AEM requires a mechanism that is called extraction, and we will have a look at that. There's a DITA metadata extraction options available from the back end, but this requires some prior configuration. The extracting DITA metadata is called serialization under the hood, and the serialization must be configured by modifying a special XML configuration file. In that file, you can define XPath rules that target the desired DITA elements and attributes that should be extracted from the DITA content. And after you've done so, you could go back in the backend to the DITA metadata extraction feature and apply the extraction rules to selected files and folders. But that is still not enough to actually work with the extracted metadata. DITA metadata, the DITA metadata is then available in the backend or under the hood of the AEM system. But to actually use this, you must add another configuration step by adding the desired extracted metadata that should be available as properties in another configuration file called metadata list. That's also available in CRXD Lite. And after you've done so, after you've added the extracted metadata elements to this list, the extracted metadata becomes actually available to be used in AEM, and you can pass this metadata as properties to the DITA Open Toolkit for generating the output. So the metadata that's available in the DITA files will be passed to the Open Toolkit, and you can, or you must, or you can configure the Open Toolkit output accordingly to make use of these extracted metadata. So AEM provides another mechanism to make DITA data and DITA metadata available in AEM. It's also something that must be configured by modifying an XML file. It's a different kind of XML file in this case. With modifying this XML file, you can actually map elements and attributes of the DITA content to AEM components in the system. And those components are the structural elements that constitute the content of the pages that are authored. So this is a mechanism which is very powerful because you can make, depending on your content and metadata model, you can make any element and attribute that is available in your data files usable in AEM for creating the output. So what you do is you can just add entries for mapping data elements and attributes in this XML configuration file, and they can then be applied to your content to create AEM components from this. So we have now talked about some mechanisms to extract data content to AEM. And we've talked about how you have to consider beforehand which metadata you actually want to expose to your users for and for further processing in AEM. Probably you will not only have consistent content from data sources in your AEM system, but also from other content or content from other sources as well. And when you do that, when you combine content from different sources, you probably will stumble across a problem that the metadata won't fit. So you will have to somehow consolidate the metadata from different sources as well. So we will have a short look beyond DITA, what you have to do and what you must consider when consolidating metadata from different sources. Because what's the problem? When combining metadata from different content sources, the following problem might occur. Well, you have metadata with the same meaning, but completely different labels for the metadata. For example, that's a sample from our data files. And the very same metadata content could be encoded quite differently, but basically the meaning is the same. So how do you represent this in AEM without running into problems with two kinds of metadata, two sets of metadata that basically mean the same but look completely different? The solution is you should use a standard for modeling your metadata. And a good standard for this purpose is IIRDS, the International Standard for Intelligent Information Request and Delivery. Parson is a member of the consortium that develops IIRDS, and it's an international standard that for the interchange of metadata for technical documentation, and as such provides a very robust model for modeling your metadata so that you can consolidate metadata from different sources and have a unified metadata model in AEM. Let's look at an example for that. You have these metadata with the same meaning but different labels. And if you look how these the content of this metadata is modeled in IIRDS, you could use these IIRDS metadata classes, as they are called, to consolidate your metadata. So you would use the role, you would describe the skill level, and the putting to use class. That'd be role and skill level and putting to use. And that way, modeling your metadata according to such a standard will make it much easier to integrate and consolidate your content from different sources in AEM and make your metadata model much more robust. Okay, so we're nearly finished. Let's wrap it up. What we've looked at today, we have looked at AEM as a very powerful data content management system that can also extract and make the data metadata data available so that you can combine data content with other types of content by means of a unified metadata model. We've looked a bit closer to some of the metadata related features in AEM, how they are used, how they can be managed and configured. And we have seen that by using data metadata, you can use the intelligence that is inherent in the data content itself, can be used to make your content much smarter. And finally, we have had a look how you can make your AEM metadata much more robust by using a standard-based metadata model like IRDS. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, just drop me a line.
Welcome everyone to this DITAWorld session titled Better Mileage from AEM's XML Editor. My name's Bernard. I'm going to show you how to get the maximum that you can out of Adobe's web-based Data XML Editor in the time I've got allocated. This is based on Editor 4, so it's the newest one available. This is what you saw in the outline. So hopefully you're using the XML Editor, and I want to show you a few ways that you can do things right. Tips and tricks. I want to speed up the way that you work with the tool. So I'll show you some tips and tricks. I'll work with content creation, a little bit of migration of material from Word, from Excel, some publishing, and behind the scenes ways that you can make the editor do what you want. Time frames tight. I want to show you how to work with content creation workflows, templates, talk about snippets, reusable content, give you a ton of tips. Work with the code view, the author view, quickly develop content, and plan some simple demonstrations so that you can just showcase a little bit of how you do things. I don't think there's enough time. We're going to see what happens. Really quickly, my name, mentioned before, Bernard Aschwanden, QR code. If you have your phone and you grab it, and this will show up again later on, but you scan that QR code, it will link to my LinkedIn profile, and you'll be able to connect with me. I'm the president of a company called Publishing Smarter. My email address is bernard@publishingsmarter.com. There is a lot of content. Again, I don't know if we can cover all of it, so we have all kinds of supplementary things to help you along the way. But remember, this is recorded. You can come back to it later, and I will have several really useful links at the end of this that you'll be able to go to learn much more. That's about as much as you want to hear from me. I'm going to dive into the good stuff. This is tips and tricks. It is a rapid fire edition, so let's get to it. A couple of quick tips for setup. Things you should do early on. Odds are the repository view that you see here is pretty familiar. In the editor, on the left near the top, there's double chevrons. You can click them to expand the sidebar. Each of the options, favorites, repository view, map view, and so on, has a lot of information available for it. The good news is there's an entire set of videos that are available on Experience League, and again, the link to that will be at the very end. You can quickly tweak the interface by changing the user preferences. I'll start by showing you what happens when you change the theme. This is the dark theme. There's also one that's even darker and one that's very, very light. I also like to set the base path. Sometimes you're looking at the repository view and you see this huge collection of folders. This lets you focus in on a specific location. We have worked really hard over the years to help people who are learning XML documentation, and we have a dedicated folder here that contains a lot of files associated with that training. By the way, for the video, I'm going to change the theme back from dark to light. Two quick changes here, the theme and the base path. If you're interested in knowing more about folder profiles and the route map, you can actually watch a bunch of the videos on Experience League to learn more. Next quick tip, if you hover over a file, you can actually see its full name and title. A lot of people don't know that if you hover over the icon, you'll get a pop-up that tells you if it's a concept, task, a map, a folder, and so on. Most people do know that if you click the plus sign, you can create a DITA file. Not everybody knows how much you can customize what happens when you click on DITA topic. This probably looks really familiar. You choose a template from the drop-down, and then you put in a title and you move ahead. A quick review of the drop-down probably shows you a lot of familiar options. Let's go play with this. I'll show you how to build a better drop-down. On that left-hand sidebar is templates. I've built out a topic for a test concept. The short description, the sample paragraph, both of those have a quick single phrase that somebody could double-click and replace. I want to make it as easy as possible for an author to use this. I also have a table that's pre-configured with information about each of my 4 quarters, projected sales, and related notes. This makes a good template. Just before I close the template, notice that when I hover over the tab, you can see the full path and even the version number of the file. If I right-click inside the tab, I actually get a bunch of pop-up contextual options. Here I'm going to use the repository in order to show where it is in the repository, but it's really helpful if you happen to be working with a map that's really complex and you've got a lot of files open and you want to find out exactly where it is in the map. So, quick tip. We're already at 5 minutes. I'm going to go to the repository view for the next piece. Just remember, I took the templates, I showed you one of the templates that had some custom content in it, but earlier in the repository when we created a new DITA topic, that template was not available. Let's go explore how to enable that template. Let's explore something called a folder profile. There's a much more detailed video on folder profiles on the Adobe Experience League site. Again, the link will follow. But basically, you work with the XML documentation on the left, and then the folder profile, in my example, is located in the top right. You could actually have a unique folder profile for all kinds of different users or locations, but I'm going to change the global profile because I want to reconfigure how templates work for everyone. I'm changing the global profile, and I've gone to the Authoring Template tab. Don't do this lightly. This is global. It will impact all users, but it's really cool. By clicking Edit, I can now go in and configure the authoring template that's available. From the drop-down, I can scroll and find Test Concept. I could also search or type in information if I had a lot of templates to quickly jump to them. You can still see all the topic templates, glossary, reference, and so on. Test Concept's not there yet. I've just selected it from the list. Clicking the Add button places it at the end of the list. Most people won't complain if somebody adds 1 or 2 templates. What I'm going to do now is take the 4 selected templates and remove them. It's that easy. I select them, I click the Delete button at the top. I now have 5 topic templates, including my new test concept, that are going to appear when anyone, because it's the global profile, when anyone tries to create a new topic. In the top left, I click Save. Let's go see the impact. Back in the repository, +, DITA topic, the same way you generally create any new DITA topic. This is where it gets interesting. I now see that restricted list of the 5 choices. One of them is the test concept, so I select it. Then I finish populating the dialog and click Create. Let's see what we get. We get a pre-populated file that's created successfully. The title is reflecting the file name, but the short desk is reading Department and Quick Overview or Intro. This is where the double click's handy. I can have my user double click. They know that this will be the Department and Quick Overview or Intro, and they can type in the appropriate information. Not bad. 8 minutes into the session, and oops, I created an actual file that I don't need. I don't know how many times anyone else has done this, but I'll show you the quick way to remove it so that it doesn't sit in the repository. In the repository, I access my quick menu, and inside it, I can choose View in Assets UI. I get a bit of a preview of the file. Looks good, actually, but I get a preview of the document, which I can close. The file named Let's See What We Get Now is at the top of the list, so I will select it. If required, on the left, you could select additional icons to add more files to the selection. Across the top, I don't have the option to delete the file, but near the end, on the right, I have an ellipses, 3 dots, that I can click. In this drop-down, I select Delete. That's a permanent action, so I just want to confirm, yes, I've selected the file that I want to delete, and then I click the red Delete button. I'm using full screen mode, but watch what happens when I return to the tab where I had worked with a file. The repository view still shows me the file called Let's See What We Get Now. In the document window, I still have the tab open. This is just a browser legacy, so I'll refresh the window. It's a pre-recorded video. I could have just cheated and jumped right to this slide, but I want you to see some of the little things along the way that sometimes throw you when you're doing some development or building. We're closing in on 10 minutes. When I'm migrating content, there's often the possibility that some of the information that's in one of the topics actually needs to be in another topic. Let's address that. I know that during conversion, the map for adding visual impact to content contained a couple of topics where I want to move information from one to the other. I'm going to open Documents with Visual Content and Working with Tables. I also noticed that somebody checked out Working with Images. There's an icon with a lock. This is just a sample, but I have 2 documents open, one Documents with Visual Content, one Working with Tables. Rather than toggling back and forth between the tabs, I'm going to right-click, and then I'm going to choose to split, and Working with Tables, I'm going to split to the left. The document Working with Tables is on the left, Documents with Visual Content is on the right, and I see a paragraph near the bottom of Working with Tables that I want to move. I can click and select the element. Once it's highlighted, I'll click and drag it straight across to where the con body ends in the Documents with Visual Content topic. Pretty nice, right? I converted content. I ended up with 2 topics, realized that I had to move information from one to the other, but instead of cutting from one, pasting into the other, I can actually drag and drop. Another really quick tip. If you have multiple tabs open, you can right-click in them and do things like close and then choose to close all, or you could keep just the one tab open, close others, or of course you could just close the current tab. I'm going to close all. And this is just a demo video. So you can see that when I close all, I'm prompted for unsaved changes and what to do. I'm just going to close without saving. I also realized that during the transformation of legacy content to my DITA environment, there's some content that was missing here, table-related information specifically. So I'm going to insert a table, and I'll see a couple of different results. This is the Insert Simple Table dialog. It doesn't have anything for a more involved actual T group, but sure, simple table. I want to show you a couple things around tables, so I'm just going to switch to the source mode for a moment so that you can see what's happening behind the scenes for a simple table. It's in the top right. I don't always recommend working with source mode, but there are a couple of very specific times where either you want to see the structure or you need to manipulate some of the information. Be really careful with it. The source mode makes it really clear this is a simple table with simple table rows and simple table entries. Back up on the top, on the right, I'm going to switch to author. The developers of the editor are pretty bright. Simple table doesn't allow you to merge cells. So if you highlight 2 cells and you try to merge, watch what happens. From the context menu, I choose merge cells. No complaints. It merged the cells, which a simple table doesn't allow. Let's take a look at the source and see what actually happened. The table correctly converted into a T group. It has call spec information with a column width and a column name, table body, row, entry with name start, name end, with the more rows for the merge. The behind the scenes shows us what actually happened. Let's go back to the author view. It turns out this is just a browser refresh. By going to the source view and back to the author, it's actually updated. But what if you want to start off with a table and a T group? I'll select the table and get rid of it. This roughly returns us to where we were. I'm back inside working with tables, I'm in that con body, and I realize there was something that during conversion may have been missed, and I need to insert a table. Not a simple table, a table. This is the same dialog, but this time I'm going to type in a title, even though I don't need it. It's a gibberish title. Then I click Insert. Simple Table doesn't support the title, therefore the developers ensured that a table with the title and the T group is automatically inserted. I have my tags view on, so it's really easy for me to select the entire title. I press Delete, and I'm left with the table. The same table that I will promptly select, and then delete. We're 14 minutes in. If you use Excel, this is the time where you should perk up and listen. And if you're watching the video later, jot down a note now that says jump ahead to 14 minutes. I have several very simple examples. I'm going to highlight from A1 to B4, and I'm going to copy and paste this and see what happens. Notice that the AEM portion is in bold and the base path is italics. Let's fix that fictitious transformation issue from old content to new and paste in the table that was missing that came from an Excel file. It's a simple table. We can fix that up afterwards, but the content's here. We lost the bold on AEM, we lost the italic on base path, but it's a starting point. I want to try a few other things, so I'll click Simple Table and delete it. Let's see what happens with some other Excel source content. This one actually used the Excel feature to format as a table. Let's see what happens if we copy and paste. Nothing particularly exciting, it's just another simple table. It's lost all the format. Hope nobody's too attached, I'm going to select it and delete it. My favorite table is gone, lament the masses. Yeah, over to Excel. Here, the format's not just bold. We also have things like the alignment that have changed, we have the $sign, we have the decimal points. There's actually some calculations in it. Let's copy and paste. At this point, I'm just curious how many people think that it's going to paste with or without the formatting of the $sign, the decimals, and so on, as well as the bold and the alignment. Anyway, let's see what happens. That's not bad. It brought across the information, it's still in the simple table, it didn't retain the alignment or the bold, but it actually maintained the calculated values, the $signs, the decimal points. In the last for the profit, the decimals had simply been removed as part of the formatting inside the Excel spreadsheet. Not bad. This time I'll show a little trickery. I'm going to take the information, the bold, the italic, the centered materials. I'm going to take this and do a copy. But instead of directly pasting to AEM, I'm actually going to paste it into a Word document first. I kind of expected the format to be retained when I brought it over here, and it is. It's a Microsoft to Microsoft transformation. Feels a little weird. I select the table in Word that started in Excel. I select and I copy it. You know where this is going. Place your bets. Will it format? Will it be a simple table? Will it be a table? If your bet was simple table, but it would retain the bold and the italic, you're a winner. Great. I'm guessing you think I'm going to select and delete it, and sure enough, I select it. I don't delete it though. I'm right-clicking in the simple table element name. And then take a look at the options. One of them is Rename Element. I'll start typing table in the Rename Element dialog. And when I see table, I will double-click. This is a correct transformation of the simple table into the table element with the T group, and it still retains the paragraphs with the bold, the paragraph with the italic. I'm also going to take the chart that's inside Excel and copy that into my AEM environment and see what happens. Apples to apples, I'm putting it into the Working with Tables document inside the first piece of the con body. This is cool. Paste recognizes that this is actually a graphical representation and allows me to upload the assets into the repository. Let's give it a name. I'll change the default. The new name makes more sense, but I also want to put it in a specific folder within my assets. I had set my user preferences to navigate to a specific location within the repository. That location has an images folder, so I select it. Everything looks good, so I'll click Upload. The Excel chart is converted to an image, uploaded into the repository, and it's correctly inserted. Not bad. Since we're already on the topic of images, let's manipulate this chart and resize it. This version of the editor allows me to hover over the corners of an image and click to drag and drop as a way to resize it. It's a really easy way to manipulate the properties of the image. Take a look on the right of the screen. There's an icon that expands a panel showing content properties. The selected content is the image, and the content properties shows that as the type. It also shows the source of it, the width and the height locked as an aspect ratio, that it's inline, and that it has an ID of image 1. I'm going to drag and drop and resize it once more. The width and height automatically update. Clicking in the concept changes the content properties. I've no longer selected the image, so I see the type as concept, and the other attributes display the attribute ID and its value. The second icon on the right displays the file properties. The third icon allows you to launch a review workflow. And the last icon manages tracked changes. The good news on each of these is that, again, they're further explored in the Adobe Experience League videos that I'll link you to at the end of this session. 20 minutes. We made it almost halfway without me going over to Microsoft Word, but I'm going to Microsoft Word. Sorry, not sorry, has to be done. I'm going to bring in some information a little quicker just to show you what happens, but it's going into the same place inside the same document. This is my Word document in the draft view. On the left, you can actually see the styles of title and heading 1 and list paragraph, as well as normal. These have been applied using best practices. I'm returning to the print layout, but not everyone uses best practices. A lot of the work that we do when it comes to file conversion and file transformation is to help people get their source content cleaned up. And in many cases, the Word document is one of the biggest challenges to convert into DITA. Let's perform a quick scan of what's here. I see the end of a numbered list, a 1, 2, 3. There's a bullet list, it's got 2 items in it, and there's a few tables. First table, pretty straightforward. It has a word in strong. There's a second table, and it actually has a merged set of cells as well as a bullet list. Let's see what we get. Going back to the beginning, and then I'll select everything to copy. Incidentally, there is a special ingestion tool that allows Word documents to be dragged and dropped into AEM and transformed based on effective use of a title, heading 1, heading 2, and so on. So if your documents are in good shape, there is a relatively quick way to bulk convert them in order to load them into the system. Back to the editor and the straightforward paste. The content's inserted, it's in paragraphs, doesn't pick up the heading 1 and the heading 2 necessarily, but it's not bad. I can see an ordered list down near the bottom. These are not bad. There's the numbered list, 2 and 3. The ordered list ends, a paragraph starts the unordered list with the 2 list items. Then I have the table, and that first simple table seems to be working okay. In the very last cell on the left, it actually even picked up the strong word. Now that was set up using an actual proper Word style. This was the table that was a little more fancy. It actually manages to bring across the unordered list with the 2 list items as bullet first and bullet second, and the ordered list with a single list item next to it also shows up. Additionally, that content is inside a table where the cells have spanned. Lastly, it's actually in a table. It's not in a simple table. So the recognition of the word simple table and the word table information correctly transformed itself on ingestion through the paste. Here we continue with what was originally inside the document. Just to give us a slightly different view, I'm going to turn off the tags view and go to the beginning of this document. It's not bad. That was a Word document, and it came across and maintained a lot of the original information. It still needs cleanup, potentially reorganizing material into a section, but again, you didn't have to rewrite it. You just have to work on further structuring it. Your mileage may vary depending on the quality of the source Word document. Let's go a little further into the source view. There's a few reasons you might want to use the source view. Let's say you're working with conditions. Platform is already configured so that Linux, Mac, and Windows has a specific value and a color assigned to it, and you can drag and drop to add them in. But list item number 2, 3, and 5 have some sort of a highlight, and I'm not sure why. I'm just toggling back to the repository view for a consistent feel, but let's go explore these. As I click on each list item, the content properties shows me the attribute of audience and the value, in this case, author. List item 3, when it's selected, shows in the content properties that the attribute for audience has a value of dev. There are times I want to see multiple values showing at the same time, or I want to be able to manipulate them. The source sometimes is a useful way to do this. I can now see lines 11, 12, and 14 really clearly identify that the audience is author, dev, and then author. Now I can double-click the attribute value and I can retype it, for example, with a capital A. Broadly, this tip provides you a reason to go into the source code and carefully make modifications, or at the very least, take a look at some of the information that's available to you and then decide how you want to move forward. Now I want to show you something kind of cool, but I have to be a bit of an impersonator to make it work. In this case, I'm going to work as the administrator, but I'm going to impersonate Vivian. I have to be careful here. My wife's name is Vivian, coincidentally. So Vivian's going to select 3 files. With these 3 files selected, at the top, she's going to check out the documents. The checkout button changes to a check-in if she wanted to check the files back in. In the very top right, I have a small icon of a face or a head. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to exit the impersonation. I'm going to click Revert to Self. I'm now going to show you how filters work and a really, really cool tip. I'm poking around in the system and I realize I want to find something. An icon in the top left provides a drop-down, and I can manipulate what's displayed inside my assets. Right now I'm seeing the content only, but I'm going to click on Filter. This opens up a world of possibility. You can see across the top, the location is the assets, and within it, a specific path to the Learning XML documentation for AEM. I also have an expanded set of filters on the left that I can work with. Just one small part of the filter allows me to look at the status, which includes things like publish and publish date and last published by. Scrolling down, I can also see the checkout. I can then choose files that are checked out or checked in. I happen to know Vivian has a vacation coming up. She's going to be taking some time and traveling with friends. Now, if you've been paying attention to the rest of the screen, it's filtered and showing me search results that only identify files that have been checked out by Vivian, and I've saved this. This is the part that makes filtering really cool. There's something called Smart Collections. So here I am sitting at the computer, I've got my repository view, and I realize I need to figure out all of the files that Vivian has checked out. In the left pane, I'm going to click on Favorites. Remember, I saved Vivian's checked out files. So in Favorites, I can now expand that to see what's contained inside of it. Quick, if you've got a pen and paper, write down all of those. I'm kidding, don't write down any of them. I'm going to show you this in a moment. I just want you to notice there's a bunch of files. We're going to come back to this in a few minutes, and I'm going to show you a before and after. That was the list then. Vivian is actually going to go in and do a little more work before she leaves for her holiday. So I'm going to go in and impersonate Vivian and show you what she might be doing. It turns out 4 files that she recently worked with are going to get selected and checked in. This time on the top toolbar, she'll click the check-in icon. Remember, this is what I had. I went in and in the assets in a specific location, I used the filters. Once I had filtered, I took the filter and I saved it with the name checked out by Vivian. The result of that was that when I looked at Vivian's checked out files, I saw all of these documents, including the ones that are highlighted at the bottom. This means that you can work in the assets, build a collection of specific filters based on a wide range of criteria, and very quickly and dynamically find exactly what you're looking for. There's one more thing I want to show you, and I don't want to show you all of this, and you'll see why. There's an entire session on this, plus we're already at about 29-30 minutes, and I want to leave a bit of room for questions and answers outside of the recorded video. That being said, I'm not letting Chad steal all of the thunder on this and show all kinds of awesome stuff. I'll at least give you a taste. When you have a map, there's a tab for output, and it has some incredibly powerful capabilities. This output allows you to create a PDF file, but it's not like any of the PDF files that you've built from a map before. This map generates a PDF without the use of FrameMaker Publishing Server, the Open Toolkit, or any other approach that you might have taken inside AEM in the past. This uses a native, integrated publishing tool. I can go in and, using the visual environment, create custom PDF. I can change the PDF layout through a drop-down to specify things like the page display. If your PDF document needs to be secure, you can go to Security, set the password, and type it directly in while you're still working inside AEM. I'll just show you 2 pages of the most generic PDF you'll ever see. Plain font, no header, no footer, the PDF file just opened up. It also opened up in the single page view. So single page view, no password. But now check this out. I'm going to go in general and give it a new PDF file name. So I just type in the new name. I'm also implementing a quick change in the layout. Instead of the single page view, I'm going to use the 2-page view. Having changed these settings in FrameMaker, FrameMaker Publish Server, and the DITA Open Toolkit, it's incredible. I click a drop down, I make a choice. I'll set a password to open the document and just click and type in my password. For the purpose of this demo, I'm actually setting the password to password so that I can officially, for once, actually get away with it. Then I click Generate Preset, and I'm going to download and open the PDF with password and with the 2-page view. That's nice. The moment I try to open it, the demo of the new PDF publishing is protected, and I have to enter in that super top secret password of password. The document displays in the 2-page layout. Still really generic looking, but it did exactly what I told it to in a couple of clicks. You can also see the size difference between the first page with map output and preset workflow, which is a subheading, the appearance of the 1, 2, 3, the graphics, and on the second page, that continuation of procedural steps restarting with 1, 2, 3, continuing with 4 and 5. I'm going to do a tweak to the page layout so that I can get some headers and footers as well. I'm going to use fields, and the project title is going to pick up the map title and place it into the header. Again, totally driven by a visual interface. There it is. No toolkit work, no compiling of information, no FrameMaker work and rebuilding an STS file and loading it onto a published server. This is integrated directly into the editor. Watch how quick it is to update the footer. It currently reads page 1. I'm going to click next to that. In the interest of time, I didn't show you every single piece of this, but this is under 30 seconds of work. I've set it up to read page 1 of 1. The last entry is a variable that's going to be the total page count. So if it's a 10-page document, I'll get page 1 of 10, page 2 of 10, page 3 of 10, and so on. By the way, if you've used RoboHelp, this might look a little familiar. All I'm doing here is I'm going into my CSS through a visual interface, and I'm changing the default body font for all of my content. I'm going to use this font style called Fantasy. I'm sure nothing can possibly go wrong with that. That was it. Couple of minutes of work, and what you have is a header and a footer and a complete font change throughout the entire document. I think it's 3 sessions to go, and you'll have a lot more information on PDF branding and customization. There's a session titled Ditch the Developer. I may take that a little personally, but Chad Dibdall is going to be presenting that. In the meantime, you can contact us by emailing info@publishingsmarter.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also visit our YouTube page. I have a couple more links that I think are going to be really helpful to you. We are at about, give or take, 34 minutes at this point. So if you need to jump forward in the video when you watch it again, and you need to get to the helpful pages, there's roughly your timestamp. We have a lot of other videos on working with FrameMaker, working with AEM, working with structured content. If you go to our YouTube channel that's seen here, you can quickly find several tips and tricks that would help you get started or do a bit of a deeper dive. And it's all free. We've even already grouped together some videos to make it easier for you to get into the flow of learning more about Experience Manager. The Adobe Experience League pages contain tutorials for working with DITA. The link will be coming up in just a moment, but it contains information on topics I didn't even have time to get to, such as working with conditions or reusable content, working with keys, snippets, deeper dive into maps and book maps, all kinds of information, so do take advantage of this free resource. There's even a collection of really good PDF documentation that is well worth downloading. At a minimum, I would suggest that you go in and look at the user guide and work your way through it in order to learn as much as you can about how to best use the editor. Today I talked about several different things, including my LinkedIn profile, the YouTube channel that we have, many of the resources that are available from Adobe, including both the Experience League and their PDF materials. All of that information is here, consolidated into one set of links. To conclude then, my contact information, the QR code that you can scan with your phone. I want to pass on a quick thank you to our hosts. Stefan, you've been fantastic to work with over the years. I really appreciate your help. The entire development, marketing, and sales team on the Adobe side, and of course, to everybody who has attended the session today and taken time to participate. I truly appreciate your support, and I would love to talk to you in more detail about how we can help you with your AEM and DITA implementation. Take care.